Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We're using hand tracking with built-in microphones. We've got tablets in front of us that show our notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, you can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on the website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Justin Corcoran, Richard Meller, Parmesan Cubits, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, DePonch, and Soul Presence. Sincerely, all of you, thank you for your support. Hello to everyone out there. Please feel free to share where you're watching us from, and hello to our time travelers catching us at different times or speeds, and those of us watching us through a universal translator into their native language. Hello to you as well. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone, and it's good to have Ian back this week. I have multiple people in the comments here asking about Robo Recall 2 news. Unfortunately, there is no Robo Recall 2 that we're aware of. I would love to see it as well. If it happens, we'll let you know. I see other people hoping for Steam Frame news, and it's the same thing. Since that trademark of Steam Frame, we haven't really seen anything else that would substantively indicate whether a launch is imminent or not. A lot of people obviously expected it to happen over Connect. It didn't. I think Valve is going to always go on Valve time. They will release something when they're ready to release something and not a minute or second earlier.
Yeah, just a random Tuesday and a random month is when we get the email that it's time, right? That's what we hope for. So Valve, you're out there. We're waiting for you to deliver on your Valve time, and we'll be ready when you're ready.
Yeah. And I mean, that is difficult. We sometimes are able to, for companies like Meta and Apple, tell you based on reliable reports when something is likely to launch. Before Quest 3S, we were very much so telling everyone, don't buy Quest 2 now. It's a terrible time to buy Quest 2. But we just don't know with Valve. They could release it tomorrow, or they could release it 2 years from now. We really do not know. There are obviously lots of indications that something is imminent, but there have been indications of something being imminent before. There 2 years ago, there were certain indications, and a year ago, there were other indications. So at some point, you just have to decide how long you want to wait, when you expect it. And unfortunately, that's the situation with Valve. They are remarkably secretive in this day and age, given that even Apple, which used to be the kind of titan of secrecy, everything they do now leaks out. You don't go to an Apple live stream these days and not have pretty much everything already announced by Mark Gurman or someone else at this point. And with Meta, it's very, very similar.
It's funny, we didn't even get to the subject here before just diving into the subject. But if you remember, there was that leak before the index, right? And I wonder, because of, I don't know if it was a display leak, but there were photos that leaked right before, a couple months or something before the headset. Because of the few number of people that work at Valve, it probably wasn't a huge undertaking to fix whatever leak caused that. Oh, that's clearly how that happened. We won't do that again.
Yeah, that's one interpretation. Another is that, if Deckard or Steam Frame or whatever it's called isn't imminent, then you wouldn't see leaks like that. But I think it's closer than ever, but that is obviously somewhat of a truism, right? It's obviously always closer than ever until it arrives. Anyway, let's get into our topics that we're discussing today. We have three pretty neat sections here. So the first one is somewhat Valve related, but not in the way that some of you are hoping. It's our SteamVR section, and we're going to talk about Valve launching Steam Link on Pico and Vive Focused Vision, as well as distributing the APK to other Android headset makers like Play for Dream to test with. And our second topic in the SteamVR section will be that Quest 3 and 3S are now used on SteamVR more than Quest 2, which ends its 4-year reign, Quest 2's 4-year reign, as the number one headset type on Steam. Then we will have a Meta Ray-Ban display section where we discuss the product selling out in pretty much 48 hours, as lots of eager early adopters have found it incredibly difficult to actually secure a unit. This has been a chaotic launch. Some would describe it as a paper launch. To what degree this is due to supply and demand is always difficult to know from the outside, but right now if you want to get one of these things, it's going to be very, very difficult. We will then talk about Ian's experience with Meta Ray-Ban display across New York City, as he was one of the lucky few who was able to secure one on launch day, one of the last units in New York City, it seems, and he'll tell you all about his experience using it in the real world. You've heard about my experience using it in the Meta communal demo room. Now you'll hear Ian's experience of using it in an actual city without any Meta handler anywhere near him. Then our third section today will be Apple. So last week I talked about how Ian had tried the MotoGP Tour de Force Apple Immersive video, but he wasn't able to make it last week. So now he'll be able to tell you all about that. And if you remember our discussion last week, the context here is that those Blackmagic cameras and DaVinci Resolve editing support are out. So this is the new wave of Apple Immersive video. We will then discuss the new Apple Vision Pro, which a bunch of reports now indicate is fairly imminent, has been listed on the official US FCC website. So this is the first, if you're someone who's very skeptical about reports, this is the first kind of direct, solid evidence that is publicly available that there's a new Vision Pro. Of course, Mac Rumors also did find, according to them, code within Apple's software that suggested a new Vision Pro, but they didn't show that publicly. So there's a lot of smoke there around the idea that Apple will soon give Vision Pro a spec bump. But on the other hand, what a lot of people have been really eagerly anticipating is not just a spec bump for today's Vision Pro, but an Apple Vision Air, as many dub it, that would deliver a cheaper and lighter experience in 2027. And so our final topic of today will be Bloomberg Mark Gurman's report or claim, or however you want to put it, that Apple has paused development of that Apple Vision Air product to instead prioritize shipping smart glasses with a display sooner. And that may be, as we will discuss and speculate, in response to Meta. We'll have to see.
Fun subjects this week. I'm excited to get through a bunch of these. Very interesting week for us both to, chase this display demo down and try to get as much as we could in front of our audience as quickly as possible. It's been quite an undertaking. Do hit the like button if you can. Send that signal out to the algorithm that lets everyone know these are real people talking as avatars in virtual reality. And it's funny, David, like we've been doing this for, 6 years now or something. We've had this studio a while. And so it's like, I don't know if you've been watching us since the early days when we were on, we even had a version of this running on HTC, on the Index. And I had that beautiful Index microphone for a little while. Like we've been broadcasting from virtual reality for over half a decade now. And, it's just still getting better with each new software release, each new hardware release. And we all know, our audience knows uniquely, I think, just how high VR goes in terms of realism eventually, right? It looks like cartoons now, but it won't always look that way. So, let's move through these first subjects, David.
Sure, let's get into the first subject. My throat's not great today, so I might have to pause to grab some water. You may have noticed me do that at the end of the topics there, but we'll make this work regardless. So our first topic is that Valve has launched Steam Link on Pico headsets and Vive Focus Vision. So this is the same Steam Link VR that you have today, very likely on your Quest headset if you're watching this show. It lets you easily, seamlessly, wirelessly connect your standalone headset to SteamVR so that it acts as if it was a wireless PC VR headset. It's not the only app that lets you do that, of course. You can get Guy Godin's virtual desktop for $25. You can also use Meta's official link, Quest Link feature, but this one has the kind of advantage of being directly integrated to SteamVR. Once you launch this, you're in SteamVR. There's no middle step. And this is something that Valve is co-developing alongside SteamVR. You see in the release notes of SteamVR, Steam Link mentioned as a core component of it. So there are not that many people out there that own Pico headsets compared to Quest, and there are very, very few who own Vive Focus Vision. but I don't think that this is explicitly what this is about. Obviously, for Valve, it is important, even when the market is small, to let as many people as possible seamlessly one-click connect to SteamVR. But I think this is more about setting the foundations for Android XR. So they've also distributed the APK out to makers of general Android headsets, such as Play for Dream. So they are testing it right now with their users, and because it has eye tracking, that includes the foveated encoding. But I think a lot of this is likely setting the stage for Steam Link to be a multi-device system that runs on Google's Android XR. And because Google's Android XR and Meta's Horizon OS and Pico OS and Vive OS all use Android at their core and support OpenXR, the Open Industry API. This same very similar APK can run along these different headsets. So I think we will probably see the Samsung Android XR headset, the headset that's set to introduce Android XR, get Steam Link very, very soon, and possibly even an APK will be out there at launch day, if not on the Google Play Store.
Really interesting to ponder whether you just explained why Valve hasn't announced its own product yet. I mean, that's ultimately a huge launch for both Google and Valve to get right before going and launching a whole nother hardware platform.
Yeah, I think there is significantly less pressure and incentive for Valve to ship any kind of hardware. I still do think they will. There's a lot of evidence that they are working on something, and they have explicitly said over the past 4 years many times, we're working on a new headset, we're working on a new headset, and they've made strong hints about it, but it's not as essential these days as it was, last decade when these were competing platforms. When all of these headsets that you buy, you can go onto their store and download Steam Link and connect to SteamVR. Valve is getting the 30% cut of any PC VR game you buy on Steam. They are getting your usage on Steam VR. I said this as soon as Steam Link VR launched on Quest almost 2 years ago now. This is a completely new era for Valve. And as we'll discuss in the Steam hardware survey in our next topic, yes, they will want to release hardware, of course, but they don't need to anymore. They just don't need to.
Yeah, so there's Shala out there saying Quest is the best thing that ever happened for Steam VR, yet everyone still thinks it's the opposite. And that there's, of course, the criticism thing of investing in games and actual original games that you've brought up repeatedly as being this unfair comparison that people hold between these companies. But Shala is pointing out kind of like the other way of viewing all this.
I very much so agree with that. I think people who think that Meta and Quest headsets are bad for PC VR haven't quite thought it through. We now live in an era where you can go out and buy a $300 or when it's on sale $250 headset that in one click for free can wirelessly connect to Steam VR. You're in there, you're playing your PC games, right? Like this is inarguably a good thing. And as we'll talk about in our next topic, look at how many of the headsets out there are Quest. Some people have this idea that these markets and these dynamics are zero sum, as in anything that Quest gets is taken away from everything else. But it's not. Like as a PC gamer, it's an amazing place to be that you can get a headset for this price that has, decent resolution, decent lenses, and if you go up to the $500 of Quest 3, really good lenses and better resolution that can just wirelessly connect. I think it's a very much so a good thing. And you saw that in the usage as Quest 2 arrived.
Yep. And we should probably let's just transition right next to the next subject if we can, I think, because it fits.
Yep, sure. I think that's a good idea, yeah, to just go straight into that next topic when we're talking about the Steam hardware survey anyway. So,
well, while you're looking up that image, I'll just say hi to Davin, Caleb, Christoph, Denver, Biggs, Kaylee. Hello to all of our members on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in today.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for being here. We always appreciate it. So the next topic on the SteamVR section is that Quest 2 has finally been dethroned as the #1 headset on Steam. So I'll just get straight to the chart, the correct one, not the wrong one. Stand by. There we go. So Quest 3 and 3S as a headset family are now the most used headset type on Steam. They're used by around a third of SteamVR users, compared to the 26.2% of Quest 2. And so, to start this topic off, the reason that we are grouping Quest 3 and 3S as a family rather than separating them is because depending on the method you use to connect to SteamVR, be it Quest Link or Virtual Desktop or SteamVR or something else like ALVR, your Quest 3S will often report as a Quest 3. So if you go look at the raw data on the Steam hardware survey, it's actually quite misleading because a lot of what's marked as Quest 3 is actually 3S users. And so what we can far more accurately say is that together as a family, they have this percentage of usage. We don't know what the breakdown is. And to some degree, it doesn't matter. Obviously, there are nuances that do matter there, right? We would love to know exactly how many people are using the Quest 3 versus the 3S on Steam. But I think in general, in terms of talking about how does Meta's current lineup have success as a PC VR system, this is the analysis we have for you now. And so you can see now that, yes, a solid third of Steam VR usage is this new Quest 3 and 3S family. And so I guess what we should obviously note is that, you know, most Quest users don't use their headset on PC. They use it as a standalone headset. So this is only a subset of Quest usage. And so they obviously will tend slightly more towards enthusiasts. So we're not suggesting here that in the wider market for standalone, Quest 3 and 3S are being used more than Quest 2. We're just saying in the specific context of PC VR, that is not the case.
So I was laughing there because I was reading Hussein's comment, and the comment is, Quest saved PC VR, Steam saved luxury yacht manufacturers. Let's put those two statements together and ask, did the Quest pay for Gabe's yacht?
So a subset of it, right? So we have to then, you know, zoom out and look at Steam VR usage as a percentage of Steam overall. We're still talking about sub 2%. If you don't adjust for Chinese users, as we've discussed before, lots of internet cafes in China and a very different VR market means that we do want to adjust for them. If we do adjust, we're still talking about somewhere between 2 and 3%. So it's mostly PC gamers that have paid for Gabe's yachts, plural, I should point out. It is a fleet of luxury super yachts.
But we don't know how many yachts he has specifically. If he has 100 yachts, it could be 2 to 3 of them, right? Were paid for by by Quest. All right.
As far as I can remember, it's somewhere like 4, 5, or 6. That kind of range.
Are we counting mini yachts? What's the definition of a yacht? Does he have like a water world type armada that runs around the yacht? I know
that one of them, I think the biggest one, does have like a follow pursuit yacht. So there is a super yacht and a yacht behind it.
I mean, well, I'll go see the yachts but I have to take a COVID test, I think, probably to go see the yacht, right? If we get invited.
That's where the Steam frame will be demoed. You'll all be flown out to
I need to try it. I mean, is there any motion on the boat? I mean, I'm on a boat. All right, let's move on.
Will Steam frame have a travel mode that supports yachts? That's a good question. I don't think any of the other headsets.
They figured that out immediately, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Gabe will say it's not ready to ship unless it supports my yacht. Yeah, so the wider context here, yes, that we kind of got into is that as an overall percentage of PC gaming, even once you filter out Chinese growth on Steam over the past few years, PC VR in general has stagnated. And so we are comparing that to the growth of PC gaming. We're not saying that overall, if you take that in, it is still growing on an absolute level. But as a percentage of PC gamers who connect a VR headset in a month, it's still stagnating, unfortunately. And I've discussed the possible reasons for this. I think some of it is that the hardware just isn't good enough yet. Some of it is the content. There is no platform holder publishing games like, you know, Batman Arkham Shadow and Deadpool VR and Asgard's Wrath 2, right? There's no... Valve published one big game 5 years ago. It's developed one major game 5 years ago and nothing since. Who else would have an incentive to spend more money than they would actually make back from sales of the game other than the platform holder? There's a chicken and egg problem there that Meta has solved by pouring billions into content, and that Valve is not willing to. And that kind of does really directly back to our Scrooge McDuck on the super yacht discussion. But of course, Gabe Newell can spend his money however he wants.
Are we ready to talk about the next subject? I'm really enjoying all the discussion out there. I see Not Suspicious as well. Hello to Clay and let's see, Brahim, Lil. Who else do we have out there? Siegfried, thank you for tuning in. They said up there earlier, I get 95% of my games from Steam. You and a very large percentage of the PC gaming space are all the same person out there with the same behavior. Steam got Metro, and there's very little content. It's all UAVR, just commenting on
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, we should go on to the next subject.
So
I want to talk about content when we get to the Apple section. Yeah.
sure, I just want to address some of these comments here because there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Shall Alaska is making the interesting point that whereas Quest and PlayStation VR, a lot of the usage is gaming in a very traditional sense. For PC VR, a lot of the usage is VR chat and simulators. And so these people, these are not rapidly growing markets. These are kind of relatively steady hobbies. And so that's kind of a major dynamic here. Mind we were pointing out that, yeah, Valve is not obviously releasing AAA content, but multi-platform publishers are. So Steam did get Metro Awakening and Behemoth and Alien, and these cross-platform titles do come across, right? And especially some of the stuff for PlayStation VR 2, like Hitman got the update. It's not that there is no content on Steam VR. It's just that if you want to convince someone to spend hundreds of dollars to buy a new accessory for their PC that gives them a new type of gaming experience, you need to have more games than just some of these. The content library needs to be big enough there, and there is a chicken and egg problem.
Well, chicken and egg problem makes me immediately go to Walkabout, and I'm sorry to fill in your bingo cards, but each course is $4, I think. Is that right? Because they did the up $4, and they're on a cycle of about 6 to 7 weeks for release, and they've grown from the year 2020 to 2025 from being just 1 to 2 devs to being more than 30 devs. And they did it by selling DLC, not just on Steam, but on Quest and other platforms as well. And it's the only example. Golf Plus would be close, but Golf Plus has a lot of tie-ins to Meta that makes it hard to establish the influence of just it's only on the Meta ecosystem. I think. I don't think Golf Plus is on Steam, so it's not the same thing. To just all of our audience, right? If you're a fan of that game, you have a reason to come back to your headset about every 6 to 7 weeks. They've built out that system that you actually got the content to come back to. I'm going every month and a half. I have a marquee reason to put on my headset and come back. And yes, there's nothing else like that. Yes, we agree that there's a content deficit, but I want to also point out that there's proof that the market is succeeding even for little guys.
Sure, but I think while Walkabout is on Steam and PC VR, I wonder how many people, of all of these people who are using a standalone headset, yes, if they're using PC VR, they're going to buy big titles like, Skydance, Behemoth, the likes on PC to get the graphics. But if I was one of these people, I would buy Walkabout standalone on the headset because it means I can then portably use it. And even if my PC's, rendering or compiling something, I can bring it with me. There's not a dramatic difference in the graphical quality of Walkabout Mini Golf from standalone to PC. Same thing with something like Beat Saber, Pistol Whip. For some of these more simple games, even if you are a big PC gamer and you want to buy things on Steam, I think on balance, you're going to want to get that on Quest anyway. So I imagine Walkabout is a good example of a standalone successful game, but I wonder how many people, given that over 50% are using standalone headsets, how many people just buy Walkabout on standalone rather than Steam?
Well, and then the complication there is they're also members of the subscription programs as well, I believe. So a lot of users get the game through that route, and the money is going to get back to Walkabout in another way, but it's not that direct purchase. And yeah, those are great questions to think about. The difference there that I pointed out in the past is if I could launch Walkabout right now on Apple Vision Pro with the PlayStation VR 2 controller, and the Live camera will record at 4K on the PC, and it'll be a crisp, beautiful, incredibly gorgeous recording for our viewers to go and look through a course because it's at 4K resolution, and I can't do that directly on a Quest. So there's different uses for the different models.
No, that's a great point. For graphically simplistic games, you can do interesting things like that with the PC, but for most users, they're probably not doing recording like that. Not Suspicious, the developer in our comments, has said, I'd love to see how many Steam users are on Steam Deck and compare that to PC VR. I don't have a recent chart for you, but I do have one from a few months ago where we actually have this exact thing. So massive caveat, this is data from a few months ago. But you can see here that Linux, including Steam Deck, is only slightly bigger than VR. So like, it's not that PC VR is tiny or anything like that. It depends how you define these things. There is kind of a paradox here that the general tech and gaming media would consider Steam Deck a success, and yet Steam Deck is, when you consider that some of these Linux users are not Steam Deck, obviously, it's actually smaller than PC VR. So there are more Steam VR users than there are Steam Deck users, and you can check this on the Steam hardware survey. It's still roughly true today. It's either quite similar or slightly smaller for the Steam Deck. So just to kind of go in a wider context, it's not like PC VR is a few tens of thousands of people. It is still actually millions of people. This roughly 2% of Steam's monthly user base is millions of people, something like between 2 and 3 million off the top of my head. It's just that in the wider kind of context of the fact that if you're building for VR, you need a bigger user base than that, right? Like, the Nintendo Wii U was considered a massive flop, and it sold something like 12 million units. So that's the install base you had there in comparison. And developers, if they're going to build these big AAA meaty games that people want to buy into a platform, they need to have a big user base in the first place. And that is the constant chicken and egg problem. And it's very, very hard to solve that chicken and egg problem. One way is to just let something slowly grow over the course of decades, right? That's pretty much what happens with some content industries. The other is to inject artificial funding in there and make it happen. That's what you see Meta doing, for example, and Valve's doing the former approach.
Let's look at this. A couple interesting comments. So to be clear on what I was saying about Walkabout on the Apple Vision Pro right now, I'm using the open source ALVR app to stream from my PC to my Apple Vision Pro. It's basically the same app as Steam Link, except unbranded and more open than Steam Link because it doesn't require a Steam account on the other end of the connection to access that content. So that's how you get a nice flow there where a 4K recording goes and records to your PC of what you're doing while I'm using a PlayStation VR controller that relays my movements over to the computer and all that. We would, of course, love to see direct actual, App Store support for Walkabout as well. They already have the iOS version, which is pretty neat, and I used it in various ways in flat screen mode. It's kind of neat to use a mouse to pull back your ball and putt that way, but it's not the same as actually getting out there on the course with people. And just wanted to clarify that for people that we're all, that there's the solutions for streaming from PC VR improving all the time, and gosh, there's so many improvements still to gain from better wireless and better wired support.
So an interesting comment here from Mastoris Mars, and they are referencing the fact that earlier I said that Valve is sending out the APK, the Android app file, to other Android headset makers for Steam Link, and Mastoris Mars is asking, maybe that will open up all headsets to get official use, including Vision Pro. So Apple Vision Pro is the only standalone VR headset, unless I'm forgetting something, I'm pretty sure I'm not, that does not run on an Android core. So Apple has Vision OS, which is actually based on iPad OS, but it's heavily, heavily modified iPad OS. And so there is zero compatibility there with an Android APK. And so that's probably why we don't see an official Steam Link VR on Vision Pro. Now, you do have the Steam Link iPad app, so you can play your flat screen Steam games on a large virtual monitor, just as you can on Steam Link VR, by the way. It does have a flat screen mode to let you do the same thing, but it doesn't have the VR support. So Valve could not just reuse the same Android code that they're using for Quest and Pico and Vive Focus Vision and Play for Dream and presumably Android XR, they would have to actually develop a Vision OS client. And so that's a lot more work for a small market. And it's worse than that because they can't even reuse their OpenXR code because Apple is the only major standalone player that doesn't support OpenXR. So Apple's proprietary standards and custom OS give it big advantages in certain ways. There are things that Apple can then do that no one else can do, and they can do some things better, but it also has a massive disadvantage when it comes to how easily it can get content like this.
Little out there has an interesting comment. I really believe AI generated media is the only thing that will jettison VR into being mainstream. The time and cost needed to develop 3D games at all times is work and money. It's an interesting comment, except it's I wonder if it flies in the face of how people are using AI right now and how we think about it'll be used in the long term. What I would love is to say, hey, produce a room for me and have it to look like crap. And I slowly mold it into looking exactly like how I want it. I go piece by piece through the room and turn it into something shiny and beautiful. And that's going to be still a time suck, right? To tweak the world. But then again, I also have to say, most worlds aren't necessarily interesting unless you have cool mechanics in them. You have a reason for the person to mess around in that world. Well, that's actually that's experience design on the next level beyond just the objects that are floating around you. You're starting to talk about like, how does the feel of this thing in your hand? Is it wobbly? What happens when you put your hand through an object in your world? Do some objects let you push your hands through and some objects don't? Those are things that AI is not ready to handle right now in implementing for you. And that's much of the joy of going to virtual reality.
Yeah, so I think everything you just described will happen. The people who think it isn't going to happen are probably not keeping up with progress or maybe in denial. But on the other hand, the people who are, the AI hype bros that say tomorrow traditional software is going away, they are deeply overestimating how quickly this is going to happen. We will get there, but not soon. That will be the ultimate solution. Right now, even per model that you're generating for decent quality assets, even on servers, you're talking about minutes at a time. Even for good reasoning models to get this kind of scripts that underlie this to make those interactions you're talking about, you can talk about minutes of reasoning time. So you could probably put together what you just described today, except between every thing you said until it actually came to life, you would be talking in minutes of delay. And that's not a great experience to stand there in VR and wait minutes for the next thing to happen. And then, I wanted to tweak that slightly and then wait minutes again. So we're going to need not so much capability. I think if you do look at like GPT-5 codecs, for example, we are getting to the point where something like that could probably be put together. But the inference time is going to need to get order of magnitudes better.
It's sort of like silly to imagine. I was trying to picture the mechanics of it, of how this could ideally work while you were explaining all that, David. And it's like, imagine you've got the best interior designer in the world and you put a headset on them, and you've got the best game designer in the world and you put a headset on them, and you put them both in this room together and you give each of them the ability to command what the space looks like around them with their words, right? And what David is describing as the server time to return good results, while a human is standing there going, this corner looks like crap, let's get a better one, right? Like, I would like color in this corner and flowers here and change this, and then they've got to wait minutes for the response to come back on that one thing, while the game designer is over there doing their own code prompting in order to add mechanics to this world. And we're describing labor and hours of it in order to get a solution. So yes, we will get there. It's just how many years is a really good question.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously why Meta pivoted from in VR creation for Horizon Worlds over to the desktop editor that's going to be, relaunched as Horizon Studio soon, because there is this very long iteration time. And so, I see a comment here from John Jones saying there's no way to know if the models are going to plateau, albeit, and that's true. But even if there was no progress made in the capabilities of AI, all we need to get what we just described, this idea of standing in VR and being able to command the world around you to change and tweak, is about 2 orders of magnitude of performance increase. And that sounds difficult, but that'll happen over time. The models get more efficient. And NVIDIA comes out with newer GPUs every year that companies like Meta and such buy up and put in their data centers. If you just take what we have today and make it faster, we're going to get there. So there is optimism, but at the same time, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yep. I think we're ready to talk about the Meta Ray-Ban display here, unless there's any comments you want to get into there.
Yeah, let's see if there's any comments here. Yeah, I think a lot of people are just giving their kind of views on AI there, and it's an interesting kind of topic. And I see some people saying that they're really ready for all these things in the next decade to arrive. So let's get on to our Meta Ray-Ban display section indeed. So the first news around it is that it is sold out almost everywhere it's available after around 48 hours. And the background here of it selling out is that many eager early adopters have significantly struggled to actually get a unit. So if you have kind of missed the wider context here, the wider context here, on Tuesday, Meta Ray-Ban display launched as a product, but only in select physical retail stores in the United States. So that is select Best Buy, LensCrafters, Sunglass Hut, and Ray-Ban stores, as well as the Meta Lab in California, their current only store. But as we talked about last week, they're going to launch an LA store soon. So even knowing which of these stores will or won't have the glasses, if you are wanting to try and walk in and get one, is a challenge. If you do walk in and try, or I guess if you did in the past few days, in most stores you would find them telling you that you need an appointment. But of course, those appointments were already by launch day booked out to mid and late October. Now they're booked out through November, some of them even December. So this has been quite the chaotic launch. There's clearly either a supply problem or an issue with how they're deploying these experts that do the demos and fittings. The reason that Meta says that they're kind of strictly requiring these demos, or at least an appointment from now, you don't technically need a demo, but you do need an appointment in most locations, is to size the Meta Neural Band. It comes in 3 sizes, 1, 2, and 3. And if you don't get the right size for your wrist, which they measure in the store, then the SEMG technology might not work optimally, and you might miss some gestures or have some gestures detected that aren't really there. So that's an interesting dynamic with this product. Over time, they're going to just have to let people measure themselves at home because they do plan to launch it online. But for now, they probably want to make sure that the first impressions that come out aren't hampered by, oh, this doesn't work because I got the wrong size. So, we've seen not just enthusiasts, but even journalists and content creators struggled to get these. There were people, going from store to store on launch day, like Ian's about to tell you in New York, as he cycled from one store to another to get a unit. And I think Meta is going to have to really expand the availability here. And they have said that. Before I hand you over to Ian, I'll just tell you what Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, has said. He said that restocks are coming, and they plan to double the number of stores where the glasses are offered compared to their original plans. And Andrew Bosworth claims, and I quote, "We were already excited about the product, but I'll be honest, this response has been much stronger than we expected, so we are working to catch up." So Ian, why don't you tell us about your experience, before you get into the experience of using the product, why don't you just tell us about your experience of acquiring it on launch day in New York City?
Yep, I love it. And I want to talk about, Texas scientist comment here before I get to that. They said, I will buy these once they work with iMessage, which is funny because they don't work with iMessage. You actually get a technically, you get a notification in the glasses that says, if you're got a group chat, it will only reply to one person.
Yes. So you get the notification from iMessage, but you can't really interact in group chats and things like that. That is because of Apple's APIs. It's not Meta deciding this. Just the context I'm going to add before you get into your thing is that is Apple's APIs. We've actually seen indications from some of the Apple rumor sites that Apple is looking to better support third-party peripherals like watches and glasses with a new API for iMessage. We'll have to see if they ship that or not. And I think they're probably going to be doing that in case regulators come and make them do it at a later point.
So, yeah, Texas scientists, will come back to you at the end when we talk about the Apple section. But now let's recap my week. And I'm going to, so to recap my week, I was gone last week because I had some personal thing to attend to. Got back into New York on Monday night, and I had jury duty at the courthouse in downtown New York on Tuesday morning. So I went to jury duty, and I brought my Apple Vision Pro in a bag, and I brought my Meta glasses in the bag with it. And I have to start here because I'm going through security at the courthouse for jury duty, and they spot the Meta glasses in the case. They're like, these Meta glasses we're probably going to have to hold on to them because you can't have a camera in the courthouse. And also, what's in this bag? And I open up the bag, and it's my VR headset. And they're like, oh, also, yeah, maybe that too. So they walk me over to security, or like this desk in the middle of the opening of this courthouse. And I tell them, you can take the Meta glasses. I don't need them, but this is my work device. This is my computer. This is my Apple Vision Pro computer. And I'm arguing with these people over the definition of a computer because I pointed out, wait, are there going to be people with laptops up there in the jury room? Wait, just passing the time with their laptops? And they're like, yeah, there will be. Like, well, this is no different than a laptop, but you can keep the Meta glasses. Anyways, I was able to keep both pair. They didn't take them away from me. I also didn't pull them out of their cases ever while I was in the courthouse. But I did notice there was a sign on the way into the courthouse that said, no beepers, no newspapers, and no food or beverages in the courthouse. So I think it's funny that we've come that far technologically that we could arguably bring a VR headset into a courthouse, except that in order for the VR headset to function, it does need to see its environment around it, and that creates all sorts of privacy issues immediately. Apple Vision Pro does, as of Vision OS 26, the last version, lets you disinclude the physical environment from any recordings. It's really interesting to think, would government facilities be able to trigger that setting in order to prevent recording in those locations?
But then what if you went on FaceTime and started sharing your view or something like that? And I guess if you have a laptop, it has a webcam on it. What happens if you turn the webcam on? There is obviously a line here that at some point it becomes crossed. It's an interesting question of where they draw the line.
So I postponed my jury duty. At some point in the future, you're going to miss me for a couple weeks because I was not able to fulfill my obligation to the state of New York. And I exited the building, and then I walked over to the Ray-Ban store. That's my lead in here. Walking over to the Ray-Ban store at like 11 in the morning on launch day. This is the main Ray-Ban store in Manhattan. And I go and sit down, and they're like, do you have an appointment? No, I do not. I have an appointment tomorrow. You need an appointment in order to demo it. I said, can I put my name on the cancellation list? They put my name on the cancellation list. There were about 4 or 5 people sitting there also trying to get these demos. I sat there for about 20 minutes trying to figure out what is going on here. Can I simply just offer you $900 to buy the things and walk out without a demo? And as you pointed, they're really strict on making sure they size you for this band so that they have the best possible experience of the demos. So I'm waiting there, trying to figure out what's going on. Doesn't look like I'm going to A, be able to get to a demo right there, or B, buy a unit. So I leave the store, I go home, and I'm like, this is the best I could do, right, on launch day. And I'm talking to David about what else I could cover. There's a hand physics lab. Looks like it's on its way to Apple Vision Pro, and I was looking to play with that and compare it to how it works on the Quest version. And we're talking about it, and David realizes he's got his band size on his wrist, and he knows it's the size of the glasses. and maybe I could take that information back to the store and get a unit with just telling them, oh, I know the size, right? And I did that at the Ray-Ban store. I biked back to the Ray-Ban store on an e-bike. I tried that there, and they're like, we're sold out already. This was 4 or 5 hours had passed from my stop off in the morning to the afternoon, and now they're sold out. And then I'm staring at the Ray-Ban employee and going, well, why would I come for my demo tomorrow if I can't buy it? And to just try it is the answer, right? And that's now what everyone is facing everywhere. If just you're going in to try out this neural band and look in the display and see if you eventually want to buy it. Then I left that Ray-Ban store because I knew I had called before and identified that there were 2 stores in New York that had actual display kits in their store on launch day. The other store was Sunglass Hut on 5th Avenue. I took the bike. I checked out a city bike again, rode it over to the Sunglass Hut and walked in there, said, do you have any units in stock? Yes, they have 2 units in stock, a size 1 band and a size 3 band. They have no openings on their schedule. It's about 5:15. I'm like, can I put myself on the cancellation list? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. All right, I'm a little parched. I need water, so I go out and get a water from some guy on the street. Come back in, sit down. They're like, oh, we've got some time for you to do a demo. 10 minutes before the next demo, come on in. The key here was that when I went into the Sunglass Hut, I made it pretty explicitly clear that I had $900 to spend, and I was very motivated to buy. That I think helped as I
Isn't it
in. What?
Isn't it 800?
I mean, after tax, because
sure, of course. I always forget Americans don't include sales tax in the price. Continue. I've forgotten the ways of North America.
Yeah. So I'm telling them that I'm very motivated to buy. Go out and get my drink. Come back, sit down. They're like, "Oh, you can come in. We've got 10 minutes before the next demo." Oh, great! I'm actually in the queue. I go back. They put the band on me. They put the glasses on me. I look at it for all of 2 minutes. I'm like, "Yep, I'll buy." I walk out to the front. They give me the size 3 band. My wrist is sized size 3. They have a little measuring thing they put on you to size 1, 2, or 3. I'm size 3. I'm go, give me the size 3. I walk up to the front. I buy the thing. And then I sit down to try to talk to you guys and let you know what's going on. I'm still wearing the test band. I've walked away from I'm almost out the store and I'm still wearing the wristband from the test earlier because I went so quickly from, yep, I'm buying it to the front. Anyways, I went and handed back the other band and then I walked out of the store and I go on the train and I realize I had planned to meet my wife at 6 p.m. at the Natural History Museum in New York. And I now had to change my directions or my plans for testing this device in a limited amount of time by going to Central Park. All right, so I go to Central Park, and this is where I sort of pick up my story. You go read my article of my first hands-on testing. I unbox this thing in the basket of the City Bike. I add data to my cell phone plan so that the band and the glasses can get firmware updates through my phone. I'm walking my City Bike through the park because I want to film videos while riding a bike again and meet up with my family on the way to the museum. So I capture my first videos. I start messing with the band. I capture a photo there. It was a really cool flow. So go read my article, and it's a pretty like neutral take of just, this is what I did for about 4 hours with these glasses. I did one thing after another. But through that and through this moment of first, like I skipped through the tutorial. I didn't really care. I had all the premises in my mind from all your reporting. I know all the gestures should be. I just want to get in and try it. And that path was from the side of Central Park to that side again about 4 hours later. I ran through the whole gamut of everything you can do with this device. and including just slowly getting a grip on these gestures. And the gestures are amazing. I finished. I don't want to go through the whole recap of everything. Go read the article. If you can see me test everything, I want to go read the comments and try to answer the analysis question, because I tried to be so neutral in my write-up of just, this is what it was like. Now it's time to talk about, was it good, right?
Yeah. So let's kind of just end the discussion of the launch itself. It's obviously very chaotic. Some of the confusion there, the last thing I want to say on the launch itself is that Meta originally said you don't need a demo, and then they took that language out of their guidance. And it turns out there's a distinction here between demo and fitting. So you did always need a fitting, but not necessarily a demo. And to make matters more confusing, as I think James O'Loughlin pointed out in the comments here, some stores had different policies. It's not like this is one giant Meta store, right? These are all different stores. Best Buy is its own thing. Sunglass Hut and LensCrafters are owned by EssilorLuxottica, the giant that Meta partnered with for the Ray-Ban and Oakley brands. And then all regional stores and managers will have their own opinions and their own decisions. And, UploadVR's Don Hopper, for example, went into his local Best Buy, and the manager was kind of like, I have no idea what's happening here. There was supposed to be a Meta person. Don has these photos that we put in our article about this of these empty shelves where there's supposed to be stock, and you can see that there's like a display unit, whether that's functional or not, who knows. This is obviously the band that they use to find your size, but this manager, according to Don, didn't even know when stock might arrive or when the person might be. So very chaotic launch. Don't think anyone can disagree about that. Meta is obviously going to need to learn a lot about doing physical retail strategies like this. Compared to Apple Vision Pro, that was a lot more sleek and kind of more well understood. And I see, someone in the comments, I think it was Subcog, pointing out that all products like this sell out at launch. Sure, but if you're going to do a physical retail strategy, you need to make it a lot more clear. How do you buy? When can you buy? Who gets to buy? Do you need a demo? Do you not? What's a demo? What's a fitting? And Meta is going to need to learn some lessons. But unless you want to say anything more about the launch, should we get on to your impressions of using the device and take some comments?
Yep. All right. So here's me on the bike taking a selfie, because David says that selfies are the way to show these things, and sure enough, yeah, it's it worked. I'm wearing my little bicycle helmet. That's why it's such a zoomed in thing, and I've got the wristband on my wrist. I noticed that you can't do the pinch gestures while resting your arm on the bar of the bike. So you have to release the bar and then you leave your hand free, and then you can do the gestures. And it worked like over that 4-hour period. It was like, oh, here's forward, here's back in the menu system, here's how to turn the display off, here's how to turn the display on. And then you do this gesture to do any radial dials or any like zoom in, zoom out in the system. And over the course of the day and a half that I had these, I went through all the ways you can use that twist gesture. And it was actually James in our audience that pointed out to me that pinch gesture can be used for zoom on the camera. And boy, was that an eye-opener. That was a really big moment to realize not only does the display over in your right eye give you a framing viewfinder. So now you can actually frame your videos and photos. But with the zoom feature, you can start to be a little cinematic if you really wanted to about exactly what kind of zoom you wanted at the right moment of your video. That's really interesting. Like now you've got a system where the subject can make eye contact with you, and they know that you're the camera and you're seeing them directly. So you're part of this creation in a slightly different way. And you've got these fine-tuned controls now for interacting with the content. That, until I saw that, I mean, that feature right there alone nearly makes my old camera glasses obsolete. Like I don't want to take pictures anymore on the old glasses because I don't have those framing capabilities. It's like I've taken so many amazing videos that are fun to look at, but you get to, I don't know, the 23rd second of the video and I shake my head like this, and it's because I didn't have that feedback that I'm actually a photographer right now, and I'm recording video for photography reasons. That
I think it's very
was my favorite part
interesting.
of the class. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah, I was
David.
going to say, no, it's just very interesting you say that, because I remember before these came out, you were saying, I don't know what I would use the HUD for. What is this HUD for? And now you're finding that for you, your usage of the regular Ray-Ban Meta glasses has been more towards the photography, and for me has been more audio. But you're saying for you, this has actually made this camera feature even better and start to become one of your kind of perhaps primary cameras in the future.
Yeah, I could see it. I don't think it's this gen, but I do see it potentially getting there. I Yeah, you're exactly right there. And I saw a question from Mindweaver up earlier. What's the protocol for going to the bathroom with these glasses? I take them to the top of my head. It's just, and I do that in anytime I'm going from a public space to a semi-private space or a place that's owned by another individual. Like it's a mom and pop type shop, maybe whatever. That's my protocol is I don't need to make any of these people uncomfortable with the idea that I'm capturing them. There's no reason to do that. It's just put them on the top of my head.
But just to be clear for our audience who aren't aware, this does still have the same LED light as the other glasses. So when you're recording or taking a video, a photo, you will see the LED pulse on the front. That's correct, yeah?
Yep, absolutely. Those lights are still there. I will also point out, though, that if you go online, there is a constant effort to obscure that light and still have the device function, and it's not a great thing.
Yeah, I've researched it. I don't think they work very well. The problem is that the LED is not just a light emitter, it's also a photo sensor. So they do actually have a way of stopping you. If, in case anyone isn't aware, if you do just cover it with a piece of tape or something, it will just, when you try to take a photo or video, say, please unblock the LED. So I presume it's the same on these, though I don't think we've explicitly tested. When I get
didn't
them,
test that.
I'll
No,
put my
yeah.
finger over and see what happens.
Yeah, so those are my so the thing on around here on this lens, I see a reflection of what's behind me. And it's extremely distracting, at least for me. David said he didn't see it in his controlled demo.
To be clear, my demo was not with any strong lighting. It was in the evening for the outdoor part, and the indoor part, there was no really bright light. So you're saying that in bright light, both indoors and outdoors, you saw these reflections in your right eye?
Yeah, so I went back to the Ray-Ban store where James was doing his demo, and he's sitting over there getting his first time in the hardware. And I'm like, do you have another pair or two of there that I can just put on? And I tried them, and it was harder to see the reflection in the dim lighting in the very dimly lit room where they were giving the Ray-Ban demos, but it was still there because I knew what to look for, and it was pretty apparent, just as much as it was on these. So like. You're right. You're doing active stuff and recording. You might have a monocular display, so you have something in your eye obscuring what you see right about there, and then you've got a reflection over here of things that are off to your side. And I'm riding my bike, and all of a sudden a tree or something blinks past my eye, and it's like, oh, what is that? And so I didn't like the reflection there. That was pretty distracting. As the more time I spent with the neural band, more I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, just to cover the reflections there, because I think this could be a major thing with smart glasses in general with the display and AR glasses. Just to be very clear to our audience of what you're talking about, you're saying that even with the display completely turned off, the issue here is that you're seeing reflections of the real world in this side. And I think the technical reason here, we haven't got this confirmed yet, but these kind of waveguide outgradings here, these outcouplings, they're designed to fundamentally, at the end of the day, bring in light from the little LCOS projector and kind of move it across your field of view in your right eye. So the problem is that a lot of the time, this is also going to catch in light from the real world, the physical world, especially if it's bright, and do the same thing, right? To shape it and bring it over your pupil's field of view. So this is, as far as I'm aware, something that is quite fundamental to waveguides. something you'll notice in the Rivet AR glasses that we covered recently. They're one of the two companies being contracted by the US Army to make AR systems for the military, as well as Anduril, is look here. Look what you see here on these Rivet AR glasses. It's a little cover to stop exactly what Ian is talking about, to stop outside light coming in and going into the waveguide outcouplings and causing the same issue. So I think there's a possibility that I really want to see, like, is this something that I notice as well when I get the glasses? We're super curious to see, like, is this something that varies by individual to individual, how much your eye cares about this? But it is possible that to get rid of this, we are going to just need to see some of these little covers on glasses. And that's something that, we've talked about waveguide glasses, HUD glasses, and AR glasses as this theoretical, but we're only now seeing, consumer products that take it out into the real world. And when you take something from the lab and early experiments into the real world, you're going to see issues like this that crop up. And I think it's fascinating that you've picked up on this, because this could be something that's fundamental to HUD glasses and AR glasses, and be a real issue that needs to be addressed.
So James out there in the comments, I would love for you to answer, whose question was it? They said, how far, it was Christoph's question, how far do you think Zoom features from being an improvement to average human eyesight for reading text from far away? So I'm sitting there with James.
Oh, sorry, continue to talk. I'm just showing our audience. Keep talking.
Oh, yeah. So I'm sitting there with James, and he basically went into the settings of my app and tested all those features. He really wanted to understand what that feature was, and I would be curious what he thinks. In my impression, my gut would be on the way the zoom works is if you've got the 0.5 lens on an iPhone and then the 1x lens on an iPhone, it's like going from 0.5x to like 0.8x or something on Zoom. It's not enough to get you anything further away for camera capture purposes. There's a separate setting to do like a preview in the little monocular display of what you're looking at inside the display. It's not this generation is my answer to that question. I think it's fascinating to see. It's something we're going to have to pay attention to really, really closely in our reporting. As soon as Apple announces the next Apple Vision Pro, and then Meta announces the next glasses, all of these things are going to come with a theoretical resolution that they can film at. And then there's the resolution you most often film at. And you're going to use that resolution in some instances to zoom. And how that zoom is used for accessibility or for capture are completely different use cases that we are going to have to be really careful about talking about. So I played with some of that stuff. I don't have anything really definitive to say, because again, I had basically 24 hours with the device in total before I put it in a box and sent it to England.
Just to go back to this reflections issue, because I'm seeing a lot of interest in the audience here and questions. They're asking, firstly, is it only in one eye? And
yes, this lens felt completely clear.
Yeah.
It was only on this side.
So some people are wondering, they've said that they've experienced this with regular glasses, but that's not what Ian's referring to here. This is, again, I haven't confirmed this, but I'm putting two and two together and using reason. This is quite obviously related to the waveguide outcouplings here. So they are doing their job in taking a little LCOS display that's up here, behind here, and kind of shaping it out to your field of view, but they are also doing their job for light that isn't supposed to be brought out there, stray light when it's very intense and it comes in at the perfect angle. That's the problem here. Could you find design solutions to this in future that kind of block out that specific angle, or are there some sort of special coatings that can be used? Who knows? But it's very, very fascinating. This is an issue, and I wonder how long it will take until some accessory maker makes exactly what I just showed for Rivet. Do you want to talk about, when it comes to your zooming thing, I think that's interesting to talk about, because I think it's just a matter of camera resolution, right? At some point, it's difficult to get a very high optical zoom camera in here, but you could imagine having multiple cameras eventually over time. But I think it's probably going to be just a raw brute force digital zoom with a I was about to say a swear word, a S ton of pixels at some point. Some point, this is 12 megapixel right now. At some point, you're going to want to just brute force.
Yeah.
Difficult with the sensor size, but it'll be interesting to see over time. Do these glasses move to the center for the camera like the Vanguard glasses? There are obvious
Which looks a
electrical
little
engineering
weirder
issues.
sometimes. Like you have to have that center eye. I do kind of like the look, even though I like the look of the capture in the center. It looks. I want to poke a person in the
Yeah.
middle of their forehead whenever I see it.
I mean, I wonder, do we get stereo cameras at some point? We will have to for AR glasses, but at some point, do you do some sort of view reconciliation between them and kind of synthesize a centered image? That's something that they could probably pull off. And is there a possibility that one of these cameras could have slightly more zoom than the other or something like that and achieve these things? We're only just seeing this category emerge. There are going to be a bunch of different crazy designs. I'm sure if anyone who was around in the early 2000s remembers all of the crazy smartphones that came out from Nokia and BlackBerry and all of these companies that were every shape you could imagine and folded in all the craziest ways. And then eventually, obviously, it landed at the slab of touchscreen. There's going to be a lot of experimentation going on here from startups and big companies alike.
Well, like as a photographer, and David, we have had a lot of debates about the use of photography in these things, and the cameras have never quite been good enough to supplant anything that we use our phones for. You go out and get a iPhone 16 or 17 Pro or the latest Google Pixel or Samsung device. You're taking, I don't know, in some cases 48 megapixel photos, and you can crop that to whatever you want, and you're taking videos that you can stabilize in post in really creative ways. But there's still this like long route to go to like give me all the things I would need to use this in that theoretical professional setting of making a commercial that I talked about earlier. But like what's really fascinating so there's a question here saying how long until we have rear view vision? And on an Apple Vision Pro today or a Meta Quest 3 today, I can plug in a UVC based webcam and stick it on the back of my head and give myself rear view vision right here, exactly like I'm a car, but the camera's out the back of my head. That's trivial today on a VR headset with a simple USB connection. That's not the what I need is a USB port in the back of these glasses to run down to a battery pack at my side so that I can record an hour-long interview at maximum resolution without it, stuttering in the middle because it overheated the glasses. And is that going to work in these glasses, or is that heat dissipation going to work better in the other design, the VR headset design?
I think you're absolutely right to point out that you're probably going to run into thermal limits long before you run into battery limits in this form factor. It is a huge problem, as we always talk about on this show. A lot of the questions of portable electronic devices and performance do come down to thermals. On the regular Ray-Ban Meta glasses, on a hot summer day of just doing regular photo and video capture, we've both run into the thing overheating. When you now have to add in the complexity of driving a display, that's going to be even more challenging. And what the solution to this, insofar that there is a solution, is that you distribute the computing throughout the glasses. It's one of the things that the Orion AR prototype does. It's not just one chipset on Orion. There are chipsets all throughout it doing different tasks. And that's what you're going to see over time. But that obviously drives up cost. There are obviously companies working on exotic cooling solutions. Microsoft Research came out with something, but that's more for server usage. It's not energy efficient. It's still in the material science research phase. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges of getting more and more capabilities in the real world. And it comes down to this reflection issue again. The joke I was going to make, by the way, is that you've described that you do already get rear view vision with this in your right eye.
That's 100% fair, yeah. And I hated it.
So we got it.
Oh man,
there we go. You've got rear view vision in your right eye.
Yeah. So what was it? Thank you for recognizing that I tested that already. And I like Shala Shaska's comment that you could have a little rear view camera and a little protrusion on the sidearm. Like, can you imagine just pressing into the little arm and this little thing flips out and now you've got your rear view camera? That was a funny one. Actually, what I was going to say is, if any bicyclists are out there, do they make uh, helmets with webcams built into them, either forward facing or rear view facing? Because that would be a really useful feature for a lot of bicyclists to have a GoPro mounted into their helmet that would allow them to record all the interactions the same way that all the car drivers out there have all those cameras installed to protect their property. Um, yeah. Anything else? We haven't even talked about the band very much.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I wanna hear all about it. Let's just take a few audience questions. People are asking about prescriptions. So this is a product that we haven't really seen, an approach we haven't really seen in any XR products yet. Prescriptions are supported from -4 to +4, but they're not aftermarket. They're not a lens that you attach. There's not an insert. It's actually bonded at manufacturing time. So you need to custom order these for your prescription, and then you can only sell them on to someone who has the exact same prescription. And that's just kind of a limitation of the current wave guides that they're using here. Maybe some aftermarket companies will figure out a clip-on, but I wonder if there would be trade-offs there. But right now, yeah, availability is limited too. I've spoken to a few people who are in this situation, and they say that their estimate, and they booked an appointment a long time ago, their estimate is mid-November. So we're seeing that there are big challenges in selling a product where you have to actually support prescriptions at manufacturing time and give someone a wristband that not just for comfort and not something that can be changed aftermarket, but actually, again, at the time of manufacturing, at the time of sale, has to suit them. So that's definitely a fascinating kind of approach there. So yeah, please let's tell us all about your impressions of controlling this thing with the wristband. And I wonder as well if you could talk a little bit about navigation as well in your time there.
Yeah, well, it became so intense to try to like push these glasses to their limit while not being fully proficient in all of the gestures. So like at one point during my testing, I had the monoscopic display had uh the viewfinder was up showing me what the camera sees right here. And then right below it, I had the next direction I needed to do in my turn. So like it's telling me in 70 feet, turn left, right here. And then right above it is the view of what my camera sees. And while those two tasks are simultaneously happening on the display, I'm having to figure out how to interact with three little icons that are like how do I interact with the bottom icon or the thing that's under the icon? It's this combination of gestures where it's swipe right, pinch. Oh, and then back. Oh, swipe left, swipe right, swipe down, pinch. Swipe right, swipe up, swipe. Like I'm going through a menu system, a tiny little menu system to to highlight little icons. Like there's an icon here, and I have to identify while moving through the world which of these little itty bitty icons is currently selected by my current gesture choice before actually doing the selection. So at one point during this, I am riding the bike through Central Park, through the bottom of Central Park, and I know the path to the Ray-Ban store because I've gone down that path the day before from this path. And I know it's almost a straight line through more than like 50 blocks of New York, Manhattan City. It's all down one street. The navigation directions offered by the glasses are all footpath directions, all pedestrian instructions. So if you try to use those instructions while riding a path, it's constantly going to tell you to go down one way paths that would be good for walkers, but not for bicyclists who have oncoming cars at them. So that was confusing. And it also tells you it's going to take an hour and a half by walking to get there, right? Maybe there was some bicycle setting there that I couldn't find. I could not find it in my menu.
Yeah. So they only advertise pedestrian and it's only in 28 cities. So this is a very interesting approach, actually. Meta has not partnered with someone. We speculated that they might partner with Bing Maps or something like that. Instead, they're actually rolling their own navigation. And so it is only 28 cities at launch. It is only pedestrian mode. And that's a huge point that you bring up, that means that they can't leverage the fact that if this was Google, Google Maps already has a cycling mode, right? Apple Maps already has that, and they're in hundreds of cities worldwide. Pretty much every city, I think, in the world is on Google Maps at this point. So, but this means that as you're running into Meta having to roll their own software from the start here, from day one, means that you're running into issues already of things you can't do that you could on other platforms.
Yep, exactly. And I've got my path. I know what route I need to take. I've pulled up the navigation to show me the way there. It's telling me it's going to take an hour and a half when I know it's only going to take me 20 minutes by bike. And I'm going down there. And I'm going down there to meet James for his demo at the Ray-Ban store, and also to go back to the store and verify that the mirroring effect is still there for me on the other two headsets there. So I'm going down there, and James is calling me on WhatsApp and on my phone, and the calls come in slightly different ways through the glasses interface depending on which way you do it. You have to go connect the glasses to WhatsApp in order to connect that system. My view sharing only works in the WhatsApp app. So if I wanted to show James where I am or what I'm looking at any time while on that call with him as I'm riding down, I have to be in WhatsApp, not using the regular phone to connect our devices. Also, at some point, James, we did the view sharing while I was walking, and it showed him, I think he said it showed him my view upside down, because it was like taking the rotation data from my phone, I think, and sending that to him with
Uh,
my view. Like, I don't know. He said at some point he saw upside down through my view.
but you also saw him, to be clear, his
I,
view in display.
Yes. So I did that while walking. I did not do that while riding. But yes, I saw him on his face right here on the display from, I think, at his home. And I'm walking through the city, and it's using my phone as the relay system for that. Wildly, wildly cool to finally experience that, even though there's little software hitches and just handing these things off. And so, for example, call comes in, the phone rings sometimes too when the device rings, or you'll feel like you hear the beep, and it's like, oh, answer. But you don't know that the menu system, the menu system might not be on the right thing at that point to hit answer. So, anyways, I ended 3 or 4 calls on him by mistake while doing all these things at once.
So it sounds like you agree with my assessment, with my hands-on, where I said that because there's no eye tracking here, this is quite a finicky interface. You're swiping along and pressing. It's almost like using a TV remote to go through an interface where it's a lot slower than a touchscreen. And I think, I described it as a bit sluggish and a bit too much. And I said in my hands-on that I felt like it could be significantly streamlined. And some people kind of wondered, is this just my view? Do you think you agree with that it is just a bit too clunky at the moment in terms of the interface?
Yeah, so I had a fascinating discussion last night. Yes, I do agree with that. Broadly, yes, I think it could use some streamlining. The swipe right, swipe left gestures are a lot to do while on a bike. Pinch gesture, selecting or going back in your menu, that's not very heavy, mentally speaking. It is quick, answer. But you also need a big fat icon in your menu to show you exactly what you've got selected the moment you hit select. So they could do some things there, I think, to adjust that. We pointed out you can change the sizing, I think, of some of the optics, or you can use the pinch gesture to zoom in on some of the actual interface items. But yeah, it does feel a little bit too slow, and it's really hard to identify. I think you pointed it out in your hands-on. I wonder how much of the slowness is due to the chip versus the feedback of my wrist getting.
Oh, I think it is, because I'm sure you noticed yourself when you make the gesture, you get a vibration on your wrist. And for me, at least, maybe you felt the same or not, that seemed instantaneous. But then the actual response in the glasses, you could see it kind of lag along. And for anyone that missed our earlier coverage, this is using the same chip as the Ray-Ban Meta glasses from 3 years ago. Sorry, 2 years ago. It's a 2-year-old chip. It is the same exact chip in the $300 glasses that don't have a display than these $800 ones that do. And as I said in my hands-on, it shows, right? But I think what the clunkiness, I think it's fundamental. I think what you're pointing out about the bicycle approach, if you imagine that there was eye tracking there, then this becomes not a problem, because instead of swiping like this, you just look at the interface you want and quickly bring up your hand like this and pinch.
Yeah.
For me, it just felt like this was half of a whole interaction system and the other half is eye tracking. And of course, I can't sit here and pretend that eye tracking would be free or easy to put in. They did show an incredibly innovative system for Orion that puts eye tracking in glasses, but how much cost would that have added? Would it be worth it? These are big questions.
So I have the personal thing there's a personal thing I want to get into at the end of this before we move on to the next subject about what is a phone and how hard is it to use a phone. But before I get that, I wanted to talk about one specific moment as I'm riding back down to the Ray-Ban store. I'm stopped at one of the lights and I'm sitting there and I'm left-handed, right? So my band is on my left hand, my dominant hand. And at one point I'm sitting there at the street light and I'm trying to like take videos of things while I'm waiting. And I reach up with my right hand and tried to do a pinch with my right hand and felt like an idiot instantaneously. Because I had that experience of look and pinch with Apple Vision Pro, and it's been built into my brain that I have two-handed look and pinch gestures anytime I want. I did at one point, I only did it once over the 24 hours I did this, but I did try to pinch once with my right hand and felt immense shame at realizing that that was a stupid idea. Is there anything specific you want to talk about here before I do the personal thing? Yeah.
So there's one question I want to ask you, which a lot of our audience have been wondering. So in my hands-on impressions, I said that for me, the monocular aspect of this, that it's only showing an image to your right eye, was such a big issue that to me it was almost like a fundamental design flaw. To me, it meant that I only really wanted to look at this display for a couple of seconds, and I don't want to do, for example, the video call thing where I see someone up for minutes at a time, and I don't want to have the mini map for navigation all the time. Don't get me wrong, I do want to quickly toggle it on and off when I get to a new area and think, where am I going? I want to quickly bring up the mini map, look at it for 3 seconds, and then put it away again, because it's only in one eye. And so that was one of my takeaways, and I'm wondering, and our audience was wondering, how much of that is my eyes and how much of that is universal? What is your feeling? I don't think you've really said yet in this episode on the monocular display. Is it a deal breaker for you? Do you feel like it makes you only want to look at it for a few seconds, or is it not an issue at all? What's your feeling there?
The only reason I want to look at that monocular display for more than a few seconds is for framing a shot in my camera, is for being suddenly, now I'm a photographer. Every other use case is get me in and out of that interface in as quick amount of time as possible. I was sitting on the train with the glasses, and there's a game called Hyper Trail in the menu, and it's swipe right, swipe left. It's like those those little tile games where you're moving the block and trying to undo a puzzle by moving one block at a time around the little square puzzle right in front of you. It's that basic premise, but you're like swiping things around this interface, a little bit 2048 or whatever that is. That game's kind of mechanic. I'm playing with that using the monocular display on the train, and I'll tell you, I made it maybe 6 or 7 levels before I got out of that menu system, and I'm like, I found a category of game that Meta makes that is worse than Horizon World games.
Yeah, and look, to be fair to Meta, this is just a little demo game they put in there to test EMG. Our understanding is that it was built just to get the wristband working so you could have something where you're constantly swiping. But yeah, no, I think we broadly agree on this, that monocular, you can put up with it for the utility, because it is amazing, as you say, to be able to quickly check a message or frame a photo or get some navigation instructions without taking anything out of your pocket. But I think we agree on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, neither of us would want to actually watch a video on this, right? You don't want to have a YouTube video up. And it's so frustrating, though, because our understanding from the reports and rumors is this is going to be replaced by a binocular model in 2 years, but that means 2 years of dealing with this monocular display.
Yeah, and so like the interaction that is the so while I said that the zoom and camera is why I would look at the monocular display for up to a minute or 3 minutes, whatever, to actually do the thing, that the navigation and then zooming in on the map, I've discovered that interaction near the end of my time playing with the device. I really got decently good with that interaction. It's a fascinating use case that there's so many little things that Meta has to figure out, or any glasses manufacturer has to figure out, to effectively get you in and out of the display to know where is your next step in where you are right now, and then just get you back in there in the right amount of time. I click, or no, I do the pinch, and then or first is double pinch to turn on the display.
Yeah.
Then I swipe over to the map, and then I pinch on the map. And then once I'm in the map, it knows where I am. And then I go like this, and I zoom or zoom out on the map. And that's a earth-shatteringly cool, mind-opening moment when you realize you've got a map that accessible to you at any moment that you can use to just figure out what your streets are. But you've also got to go read the street signs that are really small text. And the street signs don't necessarily load until you're at a certain zoom. And like, how bright is the default? How bright is the display for those 2 seconds that the map pops up is all software that's going to get sorted out over these 2 years on the road to the binocular display.
I think that's a great point, that we have to say that everything that we're talking about when it comes to the details of software, this is day one. I think where, Oculus Go or Gear VR Quest 1 was on day one. There's going to be a lot of room for improvement. They do tell us that they have plans to do just as they do with their Quest headsets. They want to be releasing, near monthly software updates here and just keep pushing out the pace and making this better and better over time. It'll be fascinating to see by the time we do get a binocular model in 2 years, according to the rumors and reports, where will this software land? And I once just Arlen's comment here is saying, all things considered, this sounds only just barely good enough to end up being a kind of terrible experience. And I actually don't think that's your takeaway here. I think you have to realize that we're pointing out the flaws here because they matter, and because you need to know as a potential buyer that this is a very much so a first generation product, and it has a bunch of flaws. The software is early, but I don't think you're saying it's terrible. I think you're just saying that it is flawed, but it's so are many first generation products, right?
Yeah, it's as flawed as the first generation iPhone. Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to make that comparison, I like LL's comment. Did you scroll reels? Did you scroll reels? No, I don't suffer from that ailment. And
you don't have the digital soma.
And so no, I didn't do that. And yeah, it's not what we want, but it is on that path, right? Like, and it's a step up from what I've had an experience. We didn't talk about the collapsible case, which is amazing.
Please tell me about it. I am fascinated by this. I think it's an amazing design, cooler than the glasses, arguably.
Well, so I put AirTags inside the cases of 2 previous Ray-Ban units because it's just so easy to lose these things and misplace them. And you're heading out the door. You don't want to go find your keys and your glasses, or you don't want to lose any of them. So I stuffed an AirTag into 2 of these existing Ray-Ban's cases, and they just barely fit. It's like a tight little strap fit, but I've got a tracked object now. Well, now these have you flip this thing off. It's like a magnetic connection over the front. Flip it up. You take these glasses, you turn them around, and then they slip into a little itty bitty like holder that snaps them into place. And then this flips back over with its shape, what it is, fully done, but or filled with the glasses and also with the case on it. But then you take these out. You unflip the magnet, you take the glasses and put them on your head, and then these sides fold in, and the whole thing, the front part, folds flat over it like a very thin wallet. Well, it's fantastic. It's
credit to The Verge for this image we're using just to illustrate this, and I think basically this seems amazing to me because one of the issues with the Ray-Ban Meta glasses is that when you're using them and bringing the case around, it's just slightly too big to fit in a pocket, and it's slightly kind of too small to justify shoving down in a bag. But you've tried this. Does this fit in your pocket?
It does. Yeah, it went perfectly in my pocket, felt amazing in there. But David, there's this is why I gave the example of the previous one. I need an AirTag on this thing. For just things can pop out of your
Sure.
wallet, but things can pop out of your pocket, and that's $900 of equipment in my pocket that I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
Or I guess it's a portion of it. It's not the whole $900, but you get my drift. That's too valuable to lose for slipping out of my pocket.
So this brings me to my kind of side tangent of the week. Motorola has just launched the first Google Find My tracker that has ultra wideband. So Google does have its own AirTag network, but every other tag so far is just the general finding on a map. This now new one that I just ordered has the ultra wideband experience like you have an iPhone. So I wonder, could Meta and Google make a deal here where Meta jumps onto Google's Find My network? Because I don't think it's going to be practical, given how these networks work, using this kind of distributed, anonymous, Bluetooth, decentralized system thing. It's not going to be practical for Meta to roll its own. If I were Meta, I would try to get this done. What could Meta give Google in exchange? I don't know, but I think it would be a very good idea. As you say,
data, right?
Yeah. Well, or
but that's fascinating theory. That is, we should follow up on that. It's not just the Find My network. It's potentially data to just mesh network some other stuff out of your glasses without the backhaul of a cellular network.
In fairness, to actually just completely kill my current point, in fairness, once you do have enough general Ray-Ban Meta glasses out there, Meta probably could actually roll its own Find My network with just the glasses, and then using their Bluetooth, they pick up on nearby glasses, because a lot of people have these, right? There are millions of people with them. They're going to be walking around. If you've left them in a store, all it would take then is someone with a Ray-Ban glasses. But yeah, I just want to say again, I think this case is an ingenious solution. I think this is really underappreciated how clever this is, because if you ask the question that I think you're going to touch on in a bit, or we'll definitely touch on in this show or another episode, like, to what extent can these things ever replace a phone? When today, not at all, right? Because they rely on your phone's LTE and 5G connection. But in the future models, one of the big practicality issues for me has always been, well, where are you going to stick this big bulky case if you have to, if you're wearing a t-shirt and shorts or something, right? Or you don't have much storage space in your jacket. Well, I think this is the answer. The case collapses. What a great design. I got to really give it to the people at Meta who come up with that case. Very clever design.
Yep. Totally agree on that one. Now I want to just, I guess, before we close off on this subject, I want to mention the sort of personal thing. And it was something I sort of dawned on me while I was chatting with James. And it's a real question if there's anyone at Meta watching us right now who is in charge of the Glasses project. I would love to talk to you about it and think about this really real situation. So I've got a family member who I've watched the internet become too difficult for them to use, too dangerous for them to use. We think of the internet as being too dangerous for children to use, and it is in a lot of situations, in a lot of cases. But actually, there's a whole other group of people, of people that are older, who may not be able to use devices the way they used to. And then if you pay attention to the growing threat of spam in every way, shape, and form that we connect with one another. The cellular carriers had to put scam likely on the front of calls to decrease the number of people picking up those phone calls, while still letting the person through just in case you might actually want that phone call. We depend on the spam blockers in our Gmail to keep all of the spam out, but the spam blockers are getting more intelligent and finding new ways to get around those spam blockers all the time. So I'm watching, sorry, I just pulled up the menu by accident. So I'm watching the internet become harder for a whole category of people to use. And Facebook is in no small part of making the internet more dangerous to use for certain people. Sending people, like the slop driven sort of news feed, mindless interactions with content puts people in a place where they're like ready to share information with others. And that's not a good place to be in when we're on the internet, in this day and age. Now, all of this is to say is I'm faced with this question sitting here going, I've got an elderly family member who can no longer properly use an iPhone. And that's after like putting every possible accessibility and content restriction on the device imaginable as created by Apple to try to protect their use of the device. And then I'm looking at these display glasses and I'm thinking about the neural band, and I'm thinking about the fact that there's only about 8 apps on the home screen. And I'm thinking about how different that is from the Facebook a mind-numbing wall that we're all familiar with a billion things all happening on this feed of friends over here and marketplace over here and notifications over here and a million little things to try to get you to interact. No, this was actually a clean, fresh start. There wasn't too much overwhelming me. There were just, I added James as a single person I could contact one at a time. I actually had the permissions set up right to just let one person really contact me, to give my contact over to Meta and then let them contact me through WhatsApp. And I'm looking at this all and going, is this actually a really safe communications platform for people that don't need more things stuffed into their devices? If you just want to give a person access to 4 or 5 contacts when they're out and about in the world, maybe they can wear the glasses and call home to whoever they need to with a second, right? And I had to kind of like explain this high level million mile view away of this whole market of just, Meta, you gave yourself a fresh start here. Don't go and do the Facebook of it, of what I'm doing on the AI app, the Meta AI app. I installed it, and the very first interface is an Instagram-like, feed of just, this is the same thing I just experienced in the Horizon app. Why are you doing it to me again? Like, I want to access the settings of my glasses.
Yeah.
First thing I do with this device always. And you're still in this thing. But here I am in this interface, and it's just, I don't have the Instagram slop being pushed at me yet.
Yet being the key word there. It is a fresh start, but I think give them time, and I'm sure they'll find a way to put a feed in there fairly soon. I think when it comes to this idea of like using this as an independent communication device, that's fascinating to me, and why we really are both very curious to see how many generations will it take until you have a 5G modem in these glasses, or, as I see James O'Loughlin suggesting in the comments, as if we suggest before, in the case, where the case now, because it's practical and portable, you keep it in your pocket and it handles doing the kind of 5G connection what your phone would. Fascinated to see when does this actually become a standalone computing device, because we talk about standalone headsets, right? VR headsets, and these glasses, it comes down to semantics, but they're not, I wouldn't call them standalone. I think at some point we're going to get a model in the future that does have 5G, and I'll say these are standalone HUD glasses or standalone AR glasses. Now, the complexity there is that they do have Wi-Fi on board. They're not like just Bluetooth like your Fitbit might be. They do actually, if you are on a Wi-Fi network, they can connect to that. I don't think they can do it on device, so you have to connect through your phone in the first place. So it's really only for at home, but that's the kind of nuance there. One point I want to bring up that James O'Loughlin has also brought up is that the collapsible case is not Meta's idea. That Snap actually had it in their 3rd generation of camera glasses. And I didn't know this because I own Gen 2, and it had a really bulky, ugly plastic case. But it turns out, I checked in the background, and James, you are right, and so we should very much so point it out, Gen 3 of the Snap camera spectacles did have this same idea back in the day. So props to Snap for coming up with that idea as far as we know. I just wanted to kind of point that out so that we're giving the right attribution. I had the Gen just before, and the case was ugly and horrible, so I didn't realize that. But well done to Snap in the end.
It's really interesting to think about USB, that battery. I would love a dual mode where the case goes into my pocket, and then I could run a battery. I could suck down the extra 2 charges from the case
Ooh.
through the wired connection through a stop. Like I would love a USB-C port in the back, like I said, in a future device.
Yeah, I think as this becomes something that is for more enthusiasts, that makes sense. You know, I pushed back on the idea of putting that in the regular $300 glasses, but I think this is, as we've talked about, such a first generation early adopter product that you do want to support use cases like that. And I'm actually surprised to not see them do it. Maybe USB-C is too big to put back here, but you could come up with some sort of proprietary simple connector for just power. And we should point out again that the Snap Spectacles dev kit, not the camera glasses from a decade ago, but the dev kit does have USB-C on the back. So Snap is potentially going to do that in the consumer product. We don't know. Very interesting to see if they kind of follow through there.
So as we move on from this to the next subject, let's just leave our audience with our next expectations, right? I wouldn't expect any impressions from us anytime soon. It's going to take a while for us to assess, but essentially, David, do you want to give them what your plan is there? Like I don't know if we want to explain to them. There was a question earlier saying, are we worried about the glasses not working in the UK for you?
Our understanding from Meta, so it's a weird kind of situation where they're able to provide over to the UK a wristband that we're getting in my size, and then Ian is providing the glasses. According to them, they will be able to make it work for us in the UK, yes. And they say if we do run into any issues, they'll be able to make it work. So we're in a weird situation where we purchased the glasses, but we're getting the wristband from Meta. And we'll obviously make this all very clear in our review on uploadvr.com as to when we got, which we got from each, etc.
And on that note, that means I have a size 3 wristband with no device to connect it to. And Meta, please give me early access. I don't beg, but I would like to beg now to have the wristband connect to my Meta Quest 3 so I can start practicing the hand gesture recognition features as soon as humanly possible so I can see how far that goes in VR with the same wristband and the micro gestures, because I know an app out there that's using the micro gestures, and I am ready to make those micro gestures behind my back in a VR headset using that size 3 wristband. That was not necessary to send to David.
I think because of this, if they do, if/when they do support wristband on Quest, you may be one of the first people outside Meta to do it, because you'll have it ready to go and pair. You'll be the second it happens, you'll wake up and go and pair.
Yeah, like David, you can call me up at 3 a.m. when that happens and wake me up from a dead sleep and say, Ian, it dropped. And I'll be like, okay, my wristband's on, let's go. Right? Yeah.
So the last question I want to take from the audience here before we move on, and we could take questions all day on this. We'll be discussing it more. I obviously plan to give you a full review and we'll discuss it more. But Nathan VRBR asks, any chance that future updates will allow internet browsing like web pages? So the Meta AI feature, we didn't really talk about this, but the difference between Meta AI on the $300 glasses and the $800 glasses, you do get visual responses, including like step-by-step guides. And some of that sometimes does include little web snippets. Even in my testing, I found this. So you kind of will get a little bit of text and an image brought from the web, kind of like when you're on Google and you see that result on the right where it's a little kind of snippet. But in terms of a full web page, I think this comes back to what we were saying earlier. Firstly, the glasses definitely is a strong word, but probably don't have the computing power to render a modern web page at any kind of level of acceptable performance. That's problem one. Problem two is that resolution-wise, this is 600 by 600, so not many websites are designed to run at that kind of resolution anyway. And problem three is the kind of clunk of scrolling around it and then going to the URL bar and interacting. How would you click on links and things like that? It's more akin to using a TV remote. And yes, some TVs have web browsers, but if you've used it, you realize, how kind of awful of an experience it is to use a web browser on a regular old TV remote. So and then the other problem on top of that is, as we keep saying, you're not going to want to stare at this monocular display for that long. And I can think of nothing worse than staring at tiny text on a monocular display like this. That said, we'll have to see what Meta does. I'm sure they have a big software roadmap.
I did see an audio only mode in the settings that I didn't get a chance to mess around with. That would be really interesting to see what you can do with the wristband in audio only mode. And gosh,
My my understanding is that just makes it fall back to act like a Ray-Ban Meta, but we'll have to test that in some detail.
yeah. Did I get nothing out of the wristband if I go to audio
It's a
only
great
mode?
question.
Yeah.
It's a great
Yeah.
question. Can you still do the volume adjusting? Well, I
Yeah.
will be testing out all of this. If there's anything that any of you want me to test out in the full review, give us a comment below the video afterwards.
He will. Yeah. That's a really good shout out. You know, we know how invested this particular audience is in the deep, hard questions of VR and AR. And so, like, if you give these comments now, it's more weight than it has just coming out of the ether. So, please give us any questions. We ready to talk about the Apple section now?
Yeah, I was just going to finish by saying that my plan is to do all day wear, as in until the battery dies. I'm going to try and wear this in every possible life scenario and see how it turns out, both from a social acceptability perspective and, a usability perspective. One thing I'm really interested in is accidental activations, like how often, if I'm just wearing this in every day activity, will I accidentally activate things? We'll find out. But yes, let's move on to our third section of this show today. We've had our SteamVR section. We've had our Meta Ray-Ban display section. Now it's time for our Apple section, which consists of 3 topics. So the first is this MotoGP Tour de Force Apple immersive video that Ian tried, and we discussed it a little bit last week. The background context here is that third-party Apple immersive video camera is now available to creators, and as is the DaVinci Resolve software, having the ability to edit Apple immersive video. And so we're now starting to see companies that aren't Apple, production companies, come out with Apple immersive video. And so this is one of the first of those. It's a very impressive video. And the last thing I want to do before Ian tells you all about it is kind of show you where the production setup system is here. So you've got, I love this image because it shows it all to scale. You've got the Blackmagic $30,000 immersive camera that records, 8K per eye, high dynamic range, 60 frames per second, some of the best dynamic range capture of any camera on the planet of any kind, support for bringing spatial audio in, super high bit rates. This is a beast. $30,000 is obviously ridiculous if you're a consumer, but for professional production companies, completely worth it to be able to build for a new platform. Here's the Vision Pro that this editor can put on at any moment to preview what they're editing, and here's DaVinci Resolve where they're editing it. So this is what made the production of what Ian is about to tell you about possible. And now, Ian, why don't you tell us about this Apple immersive video Tour de Force? You're muted. Ian, you're muted.
Sorry about that. That's the fill in your bingo slot for Ian is muted. I'm seeing Sampler out there saying that was a pretty neat video. Watched it 2 days ago. Sampler, did you get chills at 1 minute and 30 seconds into this documentary when the bikes race off of their starting lines? I'd love. There's not a whole lot of people that have gotten to see this. There's a moment in this documentary when they say that the racers go over 300 kilometers an hour, I think is the number. And I ask Siri, hey Siri, how much is 300 kilometers an hour in miles per hour? And Siri's little icon pops up right here in my vision and says that's around 200 miles an hour, I think is what it was, or near right under 200 miles an hour. And it looked at that moment that happened with the Siri icon floating in front of me, and I'm watching a race, this motorcycle race, stretching out in front of me everywhere I can look. If I had taken a screenshot of that and been able to include it in the article, it would have looked like augmented reality to the viewer. you the viewer would have seen this image flattened out that shows a person just standing on the sidelines of a race with digital content floating. That was a long time to answer that question. Wow.
Did
My
Siri answer?
local, yeah, my local just got to it like 30 seconds later. I don't know why it took that.
Well, we couldn't hear it. The way the microphones work don't let us hear other
So yeah,
people.
Siri just answered my question here, and I'm trying not to say her name again so she doesn't get invoked in another 30 seconds. SIRI answered the question when I didn't want it to. What I'm trying to describe is that this screenshot would have looked like augmented reality, but I am in the purest version of virtual reality that Apple has yet shipped, right? I am in a 180-degree 3D VR video, and I've just pulled up the operating system to answer that question for me, right? And it's phenomenal. It was a phenomenal moment. This Apple said that production setup you showed, they took the Apple Vision Pro headset out to the course and used it in a tight editing flow with the placement of these cameras. So they take this camera and they placed it exactly trackside at the perfect spot. And I've described this for years, David. It's nuts that we've gone full circle. I feel like we did a podcast in the early days where were you on board here when they did the presidential elections back in the day with 360 and 180-degree cameras? But like they put the camera on the other side of the stage away, and you can't see the faces of a single debater over there, right? Now they've used the headset and they've used the camera to put the camera in the exact perfect spot, and the camera goes up there trackside on the track. There's nothing blocking you, and all these motorcycle riders riders are waiting. They're all getting into position. They all put their heads down at the same time and then go. And you see acceleration going off that starting point. And I described it in my article as you've never seen acceleration like that. Well, the reason you've never seen acceleration like that is you've never had this resolution with this frame rate at this field of view provided to you from the camera's lens all the way to your eyeball. And now you feel like you've just witnessed a Tron light cycle race because you had this moment of standing there as this race started. Like it's the story is about, is it Johann Zarco? I'm trying to remember that name off the top of my head. If there's any fans of MotoGP racing, I apologize if I just butchered this guy's name. But early in the documentary, they put the camera again at the perfect spot where his bike is right here. The crowd is over here in the distance a little bit. And there's a space on the ground right here, right next to me, right? I'm describing to you the space around me in virtual reality provided by a 3D video that's embedded in my memory from watching it 2 weeks ago. And the only reason it is this crisp of a memory that I can actually recreate this space for you on this podcast a couple of weeks later is because, again, the resolution, the frame rate, and the field of view of all this, in addition to the framing, was locked in perfectly. So let me describe this scene. His bike, the bike that goes hundreds of miles per hour or 300 kilometers per hour, depending where you are in the world, is right here. It's right next to me. And there's this space on the ground right over here. And this motorcycle rider crawls on top of his bike and then does a backflip onto the ground right over here, right in front of me. And all the crowd and everyone are all cheering. And I'm just like, why did he just do a backflip? Who is this guy? Why? Like it's a storytelling technique. They picked a spot to put the camera that they knew a piece of action was going to happen that was going to be perfect for the viewer. And then they put it for you, the viewer of this documentary, at the right time in framing with a story. And you finish this half an hour with this motorcycle rider. He had to race in the rain and he had to pick whether what type of wheels to use, and that would affect whether he would win the race. There were multiple crashes that they captured from different angles with the cameras. They did fascinating things where they put one of the cameras inside the broadcast booth so that you could see the broadcasters looking at the footage being captured by other cameras of the scene. And so they had like a B-roll type footage to show and fill in gaps in the storytelling that they couldn't, provide for you, the viewer, later. There's a later shot in this film where, to spoil it for you, he wins the race in France. This main subject of this documentary, despite the rain, despite the crashes. And early in the documentary, I've got this image of this guy who's apparently, maybe that's his thing, doing backflips off his motorcycle, right? And one of the shots is his crew all cheering in the foreground, but off in the corner here, right in the distance, it's off on the other side in the distance. I see the guy standing there on the barrier of the racetrack, and he does another backflip right onto the track of the race. And it's like a bookend, right? If you've watched the studio and you start enjoying that TV show over on Apple TV, learning about how movies get made and the different storytelling techniques, they just did a storytelling technique of bookends, using a documentary, using Apple immersive cameras for the first time. And boy, I just spent 30 minutes becoming a fan of this back flipper off motorcycles, right?
Yeah, I'm really trying to make time to watch this because I really want to, and I keep not having time because things pop up. But in general, from watching previous Apple immersive video documentaries, this is the perfect documentary format. It's at the point where if I'm ever watching a flat screen documentary, like on a regular TV, I'm just thinking, this is not, like, this is superseded. This is wrong. I need to be there in 3D and 180. And as I say all the time on this show, I'm sure it's part of the VR download drinking game now. It is amazing to see how this entire format, everything that we're talking about today, as Ian has discussed, it's all been tried before a decade ago. It all existed, but it sucked. And the technology in the background just got better and better. And then we crossed a threshold where now it doesn't suck and it's good. And I just think that's fascinating because there's so much technology analysis that never stops to answer that question. Is the idea bad or is the implementation bad? And this is a great example of something that applies to a lot of XR in general, a lot of VR headset and smart glasses discussion. Some of these ideas are not bad that are being introduced even today, but they're going to actually work out in the 2030s when the technology picks up and gets good enough then. And so this is a great example of, I feel bad for a lot of the 180-degree 3D filmmakers of the 2010s who weren't able to find success because the technology wasn't there yet. Sometimes it's just as bad to be early than to have the wrong idea. But I think that that's why kind of the optimism is here now, because as we keep saying, if you are a production company that can afford $30,000 for a camera, or as James O'Loughlin is suggesting in the comments, you rent it out from someone for less, you can now go and produce for this format, and you can build content that people will actually want to sit there and watch over and over again. And I think this is just, it's really great to see. And, if your one particular thing hasn't been done yet, your one interest in life hasn't been done yet, it's just a matter of time. Like, there's someone out there who has an Apple Vision Pro whose life passion is MotoGP, and this came out and they thought, fuck yeah, this is the best day of my life, And so for everyone in our audience, think, as I always say, imagine what is your passion, and then imagine an Apple immersive video documentary or live stream in future when live is possible, addressing that. And then you realize that yes, there is a wider market than just gaming, and this is one of those examples of that wider market potential.
So, Sampler, the most surprising thing about sports documentaries and Apple Immersives is that it makes athletes look like humans and not like stars. That is a very interesting way of thinking about it. We don't also, what does it feel like to be there on the sideline of the football game when the wide receiver does the leaping catch into the end zone, and the framing works so perfectly that he slides right in front of the camera, and that was a human that just did that act right in front of me. Not this little itty bitty person you saw on a screen in the distance. And yeah, you can see like there's all this space around him and you get this sense of just how hard it was for him to do it. No, this is the opposite. He just dived right into me. That was amazing.
Yeah, the sense of this true perspective you get is incredible. For me, during the Metallica concert Apple Immersive video, going from being in the back room with the stars and then having this camera follow them out from this kind of dark tunnel into this giant crowd and seeing the other perspective that you never see when you're at a concert, the other side of everyone staring at them, everyone with their phone lights and their cameras, constant photos, everyone kind of screaming and putting their hands out. And you can watch a video on this, and I've watched videos on this on YouTube on a flat screen, but it doesn't tell you anything about what it really feels like. But when you're in this format, you know what it feels like on a visceral level. And I'm so bullish on Apple Immersive Video and of course of the equivalents that Meta will be putting out there, partially with the partnership through James Cameron as well for Quest owners.
Yep. And for budding filmmakers out there, for young filmmakers who don't have budget, James was in the comments there asking about whether B&H Photo rents these out. That, I mean, that's an expense, right? But that is a possibility. The thing that was critical here with this production is I think Apple said there were 4 of the cameras. So you're talking $100,000 in expense of hardware in order to capture those angles at that right time. You require a team of filmmakers to have planned out where to put those cameras. Maybe they storyboarded out their documentary beforehand and thought through what was going to work and when. And then it all came together and they spent months piecing together all those elements. But you think about that expense, right? Was it the Ozo camera or whatever those failed cameras from a decade ago were? That thing was $100,000, as I recall. And I remember the manufacturer of it like laughing with me about the fact that they tried to put it on a race car and it popped off the race car and flew. This $100,000 piece of equipment tumbling across the road it was a hilarious thing to imagine back in the day. But we didn't watch that video because it wasn't good, right? It didn't make production. And here I'm saying it's good. This is crossing a threshold. There is a strong push here that like. What does a 2-hour movie look like now? I want to know, with this amount of money put into immersive equipment produced at this level. Submerged only barely scratched the surface.
With like 15 minutes or so. Just for our audience's context, Submerged was the first scripted Apple Immersive Video, like a short film, and it was like 15 minutes or so from the director of It's All Quiet in the Western Front. And Ian tried it, and I've obviously tried it as well. It's great. And this then moves on to 30 minutes. It's a documentary, but 30 minutes, and you're kind of wondering, what does it take to get 2 hours? I think some of it is going to come into our discussion we're going to get into soon, which is about comfort and price and things like that. But it is a fascinating thing to think. Is there anything else you want to talk about on this topic, or do we want to get into the headsets for Apple?
Yeah, let's see. Dear filmmaker, please invest your money and time making videos for a headset which may not be in production when you're done. Interesting.
That gets us to our next topic.
I've thought about this a lot. I'm unprepared to spend $3,500 on a new Apple Vision Pro, even though I need to have it. I know I need to have it to test whatever capabilities come with the spec bump. And it's going to be me testing things in a lot of the same scenarios that I'm discussing now, except with whatever the cameras on the new headset are capable of doing with that spec bump is going to be like an eye-opening moment for me. If I can get 60 frames per second or 90 frames per second spatial video, I'm convinced it's going to look like my video was a window into my world. And the moment that happens, I start using the Apple Vision Pro to capture family moments that I'm leaving my phone behind in a bunch of instances to capture moments in this format that I do believe will still be with us 100 years from now.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about this next Apple headset, because we have two stories here. We're gonna, at the end of the show, talk about the report of the Apple Vision Air being reportedly cancelled. But first, we'll talk about what's next for Apple's headsets, and as Ian is pointing out here. So for months now, we've seen rumors of a Apple Vision Pro refresh that will, according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman and supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, be essentially identical, except that it will have an upgraded chipset and a better strap. Now, when I say identical, I mean from a hardware components perspective. As Ian is suggesting here, when you get a much more powerful chipset, that opens up a lot more software potential possibilities that could happen. So the news here that we're bringing up this week is that this thing is actually now passed through the FCC. So it's officially listed on the FCC website, or it was until I think there's some sort of US government shutdown. We're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, but it was, at the time that we reported on this, available on the US FCC. Here is one of the diagrams from this testing. The FCC, if you're not aware, it's responsible for the wireless regulating. So they have to test whether these things, emit the right amount of wireless energy at the right kind of frequencies, and that they are doing what they say they do. So as a company, you pay a contractor to test out your product before you're able to sell it on the market. Quite boring stuff, but it does sometimes let us see these products in advance. Not an image of it. This is obviously from, a specific absorption ratio testing system. But what's fascinating about this is that this is the diagram from this test. And here is the diagram from the original Apple Vision Pro. And you'll notice something. It is literally identical. I went through and checked. I looked around. It's identical. That's slightly zoomed out differently in these two images, but what we are basically suggesting here is that it seems like the reports that this is just, in quotes, a spec bump is true. This, at least from this image, that is, again, this is not speculative. This is literally from the FCC's testing of a new Apple headset. It does appear that this will be upgraded. And so the reports suggest, depending on who you believe, that it will either be the M4 chip or the M5 chip. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has talked about the M4, and supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo talked about the M5, and Mac rumors say that they found references to an M5 Apple Vision Pro in Apple's code. I guess theoretically it might be like a tiered thing, right? It might be $3,500 for the M4 and $5,000 for the M5. Those are just joking numbers, of course. But
don't do it, Apple. I can't handle it.
I think, look, regardless of what it is, the current Vision Pro uses the M2. As I always say on this show, it was supposed to come out in 2022. It is actually very outdated now in many ways. But the spec bump here will not only allow for greater performance, right? So you're obviously going to be able to render 3D environments in greater detail. I would be shocked if they don't just do a global resolution increase for everything being done through Reality Kit at the very least, so that everything just gets higher resolution rendering by default. You also can add more capabilities because the chipset has, a vastly better NPU, or as Apple calls it, the neural engine, I think is their term for it. So then they can do more computer vision tasks. So maybe the segmentation of your hands and arms is better, because right now it kind of is not good in low light. It's a bit jaggy. Maybe they can do better object tracking, because as Ian found out and discussed, you can do static object tracking by training it on your Mac for 6 hours and then compiling it into the app. Can we do dynamic object tracking? Can we do static object without training?
Cat.
That's a great point. Can we do cat and dog detection, pet detection? Once you get more neural overhead, you can do these sort of things. Could we get neural upscaling, right? I don't think that's done on the current Vision Pro. You could go even further with graphics. We talked recently about how some enterprise companies are using Vision Pro as essentially almost PC VR quality rendering for mixed reality without needing a PC. Well, the M5 or the M4, whatever it is, it's going to be a big upgrade. They're going to be able to do some, higher and higher resolution CAD models and things like this. Enterprise, from my understanding, has actually been one of the biggest pushes of this new model. My kind of limited understanding of the situation is that they want more compute on board. So that'll be interesting to see. And you point out, as a consumer, would you upgrade? I don't think it would be a good idea to spend $3,500 to upgrade, but for some people it's worth it. But for enterprise, if you're Porsche or whatever company you are using this, I think KLM or any of the other kind of companies, of course you'll do it. You'll do it overnight to be able
The math of whether it makes you more money it changes really fast, right?
of
And
course.
yeah, let's see. There was some interesting comments out there. And we gotta respond to this one. Is it for the next story?
Well, I think the
It's for
next
the next
story is.
story. We got to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's just quickly recap this. We strongly expect that Apple will sometime soon give Vision Pro a spec bump with a better chip, maybe a new strap, but fundamentally it's going to be the same device from a design perspective. That's what we understand from the reports, from this FCC diagram. That is, I don't think anyone is doubting that. I haven't seen any reputable person say that this is not going to happen. It seems like this is going to happen. The M2 will no longer be the chip for Vision Pro. It will be the M4, M5. I would strongly, highly confidently say that that's going to happen. Separately, though, and this brings us into our next story, since before the current Vision Pro was even unveiled, there have been reports that Apple was working on a cheaper and lighter model for the future. And so Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has suggested that some of the things that this cheaper and lighter model will do or would do, we'll get into that in a second, would be to move to an A series chip, so an iPhone chip like the A18 Pro, A19 Pro, A20 Pro, A21 Pro, one of these iPhone Pro chips instead of the M series chips. So that gives you lower cost. It also means that there's less power draw, so you can have a smaller battery or you can do longer battery life with the same battery. It also means less thermals, so you can have a less expensive, less heavy cooling assembly, including, maybe you go down to one fan instead of two. Maybe, you have less thick heat sink. Those are all the advantages you get from an A series chip. And then the other thing that Gurman said that it would do would be to remove the eyesight lenticular front display. So you no longer get this rendered view of your eyes on the front, but it's a trade-off for a lower price product. So again, those reports have been out there since before even Vision Pro launched, that Apple, this has been a product in development for a very, very, very long time. So more recently, a few months ago, supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo came out with some very, very specific claims on this. He claimed that it would be 40% lighter, 50% cheaper, and go into mass production in the second half of 2027, so 2 years from now. So that brings us on to the news from yesterday. So many people, including Kuo, have dubbed this the Apple Vision Air. That's not an official name. I don't think anyone's claiming to know what Apple would have called it or would call it or will call it. We'll get into that. But Apple Vision Air is what we're going to use for shorthand here because it makes it easy to understand what we're talking about. And it's easy, better than constantly saying the cheaper and lighter headset for 2027. We're going to just say Apple Vision Air, but I want to really stress nobody knows what Apple would call such a product. So according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman in the report yesterday that we picked up on, this is really dramatic reporting. It's gone all over the internet. People have spun all kind of narratives about it. But according to this report, Apple has paused development of this Apple Vision Air, so-called, and reassigned staff working on it to prioritize shipping smart glasses with a display. So we have also heard many, many reports about Apple working on smart glasses. And it seems that there are two models currently in active development, like not just R&D, proper development. One of them would be a Ray-Ban Meta equivalent, like the base model that wouldn't have any display. So it would just be camera, audio, speakers and mic. Instead of Meta AI, it's Siri. It's Ray-Ban Meta, the regular displayless ones, but with the Apple ecosystem and Siri instead of the Meta ecosystem and Meta, right? Understandable product. There is some confusion about whether Apple is aiming for late 2026 or early 2027, but it seems like that's the kind of time period we're talking about. So anywhere from a year from now to kind of a year and 6 months, we're talking about that kind of time frame, 12 to 18 months for the Apple glasses that do not have a display. But according to this report from Gurman, part of this push to reassign staff and pause, according to him, the Apple Vision Air, so-called, is to prioritize the other model of glasses, which would have a display. And so, according to Gurman, the kind of current/previous timeline for Apple's display glasses competitor, right, their HUD glasses, was 2028. Okay, so 3 years from now. But if you read between the lines, if 2028 was the plan and they care about this so much that they're reassigning staff from Vision Air, I think it's possible that what Apple is trying to do here is get display glasses, HUD glasses out in 2027. And so a lot of people have read this as a cancellation of Vision Air. And Bloomberg's headline said shelves, but the content of the article itself, remember that there's often internal drama at these kind of publications about who writes the headline versus the content. The content of the article itself said paused. So what I wonder here is what really happening? Is Apple deciding we need to get our A team on getting a Meta Ray-Ban display competitor out ASAP in time for Meta coming out with a binocular version in 2027? So are they hoping that in the same season that Meta comes out with Meta Ray-Ban Display 2, now with twice the displays, Apple comes out with the equivalent, right? Apple HUD glasses that have the same thing, a display in each eye, presumably. No one's confirmed that. And then once they are satisfied that they have got enough engineering progress made to get that out, then they bring the staff back onto Vision Air, and maybe that pushes Vision Air out to 2028. That's my speculative analysis of what I think is more likely going on here than outright cancellation. I think we can debate the reasons. Some are arguing that Apple is spooked by Meta, right? That Mark Zuckerberg is flying out the door with products, and that there's a lot of, to be fair to this argument, there is a lot of market clamor amongst investors and the market and the analysts saying, Tim Cook, where are you? Why is Meta putting out these glasses? Why isn't this Apple? This should have been Apple's moment. There are a bunch of people saying if Steve Jobs was still in charge, if Steve Jobs was still alive, Apple would have been the one launching these glasses. And so Mark Zuckerberg is insulated from this kind of pressure in a sense because he has a controlling share of Meta. He is the ultimate decider. But Tim Cook is not. Tim Cook is a regular CEO. And I don't mean that in any disparaging way. I just mean in a literal sense. He can be removed by the board of directors or the shareholders. He is not a founder owner. He doesn't have anything like a 50% plus controlling share. He, to some degree, he can obviously say, trust us. We're one of the richest companies in the world. We are growing all the time. We're executing. Just trust us. And I think most of the time people do. But in recent years, I've seen something that I haven't seen towards Apple in decades. And it is some actual solid skepticism and pushback from their investors and analysts of saying, firstly on AI, right, with the whole debacle about advanced Siri going, Apple, have you missed the AI boat? Are you not doing the right thing on AI? Have you underinvested? Have you missed this boat? And now with smart glasses with a display and smart glasses in general, which are related to AI, right? Because these companies often call them AI glasses. There's this clamor has kind of extended over. And so when you have this, huge pressure on Apple, do something about AI, Meta coming out here with the glasses, and the regular Ray-Ban Meta glasses are flying off the shelves. They're selling them as fast as they can make them. We don't know anything about the scale of the Meta Ray-Ban display, but they do seem to have had quite a strong launch. Who knows how much of that is supply? At some point, what matters here is not the reality, but the perception and the market perception and the analyst perception. And I wonder, I don't think Vision Air is cancelled, but I do think it's strongly possible that all of this clamor has gotten into the Apple executives' heads a bit, and they've decided, shit, let's get the display glasses out faster.
So many things to think about here. What if the display glasses are the Apple Vision Air, and they're binocular with, what we've wanted all along, right? A small binocular display that's basically a HUD, but I mean, it's nice to look at for longer periods of time than 2 or 3 seconds. It's binocular. It's expensive because they attach the Apple pricing to it. But would that not be an Apple Vision Air? It would use all the same APIs at some level.
No, I mean it wouldn't, right? So an Apple Vision headset is something that is running, a full-fledged Vision OS. It's like a more of a laptop than a phone. And look at the Ray-Ban display glasses you have. Look at the massive compute difference in form factor. I think Vision
Yeah.
is going to be their headset line, and the glasses are going to be a different thing. Just like Apple is not magic. It has amazing engineers. It can do some of the best miniaturization in the industry. The Apple Watch, the AirPod, they're amazing feats of engineering, but it's not magic. It can't put a Vision Pro into glasses. No one can do that yet. If they
N-
could, they would be the first $1 trillion company
n-
overnight.
So let's talk about AirDrop, and let's talk about it in context to the one of the paragraphs I had in my display article. Um, you and I, James and I, are sitting there together at the restaurant, and he wants the photos that I took of him um, testing out the Ray-Ban glasses 20 minutes before over in the Ray-Ban store. So I say, turn your AirDrop on, and I go to my Photos app and I select 10 photos that I had shot of him while he was doing his demo, and I hit send AirDrop. He pops up because he's turned his AirDrop on. I hit send, and within about 5 to 10 seconds, 5 seconds or so, he has the full resolution copy of all of those
Sure.
images directly on the thing. Now, why can't I take that out of a watch and hand it to him? If he's got the Apple glasses and I've got the Apple glasses, why can't I, flip up my images from stored on a band and
Well,
hand them to him?
Well, I mean, why wouldn't it just be stored on the glasses? Why wouldn't you just hit share and AirDrop in the glasses interface? Now, Meta would argue, of course, for the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, or sorry, the Meta Ray-Ban display that you just send on WhatsApp, right? You go and I think it even, if I'm right in saying you take an image on the Meta Ray-Ban display and there is a little share icon and you click it and you can go to WhatsApp and send it. I think I played around with
There
that at the
might it
demo.
might have been there, but I did not. That's not my usage pattern, so I didn't test that.
Again,
But
so
yeah,
the
I'll have to
different
look into
in
that.
the United States and the rest of the world, if you're sending someone an image in the rest of the world, by default, someone would expect you to send it on WhatsApp. It's just kind of how people do things. But obviously, in the United States, that's different, and this is a huge advantage of when Apple enters the market. To kind of push back, or not to push back, sorry, to agree with you. When there are Apple glasses out, even if we imagine that Meta Ray-Ban Display 2 and Apple Glasses Display are identical hardware wise. And they're not going to be. I'm just saying, just for the sake of argument, there would be massive reasons that you would want to use, if you are an Apple user, like you are an iPhone user, the Apple glasses. And AirDrop is a great example of that. And Siri and all of your integration. It is a huge point here. So in some ways, I don't think it's going to matter if Apple is quote unquote late. I think people are being too short term thinking about that. And again, I want to come back to reality versus perception. I don't think Apple has anything to be worried about that Meta has put out a monocular pair of glasses with very early software and, flaws and stuff. But like what matters again for the share price is, do analysts think that? Do investors think that? I Apple has to care what other people think, and it didn't used to because there was so much trust in it. But I think we're in the 2020s. One thing that's changed in the tech industry is that Apple is no longer seen as this kind of flawless leviathan that is always going to execute. There is big questions about, are we, like, will we soon see Apple peak? It hasn't peaked objectively on like a financial level, but there are big questions from analysts in the market. And again, I'm not saying I think this. I'm just saying, if people think this, it matters when you're a regular CEO like Tim Cook versus being a founder owner CEO like Mark Zuckerberg, who can just say, I don't care what you think. I have 50% plus controlling stake. I'm going to do what I want.
So I'm holding my iPhone in my hand right here. It's the iPhone 16 Pro. I've owned almost every generation of iPhone since 2007. Love the device. I'm ready to toss it. I don't think I need an iPhone anymore. What I'm trying to describe there is I lost some of our audience last week. Let's see if I can reach you though. Um, I want a watch, I want glasses, and I want a headset. I don't want a phone anymore. I think they're the that's the last century's technology. It's aging out. We have avatars that we can present ourselves through both of these device categories. You have unlimited screen space in 3D in a VR headset. I do not need the phone anymore. And so here you have an entire company that has ballooned from tiny little Apple computer into this spaceship on Earth that the iPhone built. And we don't need the iPhone anymore. Meta has been working towards this future for 15 to 20 years of uncoupling our need from iPhones and phones, and we're here. We are here. You give me an Apple Vision Pro and a cellular connection when I'm out, and I'm good, right? Like on two different devices in two different categories. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying I agree with you. Personally, I hate the heads down, eyes down nature of smartphones. I think we are nearly going to enter this era of eyes up, heads up computing, and what some people call it ambient computing. And I agree that we are starting to see the very basic foundations placed. And this is the shadow that overshadows everything. And this is probably why Apple is, you're probably right to point out that this is probably why Apple is more interested in accelerating certain plans versus market speculation, because we're seeing the very foundations placed for the post-phone era in the same way that Steve Jobs talked about when the iPod and iPhone were starting to, become a thing. He talked about this idea of the post-PC era, and it was thought of as strange back then, this idea that it's crazy to even say this today because it's so assumed that this was the historical path that always would happen, but it was not. People were deeply skeptical of the idea of a post-PC era.
Go watch the BlackBerry movie, right? Sorry.
Yes, I'm just going to say people's idea was that the PC would be your primary computing device and anything else would be a peripheral, right? When the iPod launched, you needed that FireWire cable into your Mac. When your iPod launched even, you synced your music from your PC. It was the primary device. You had your iTunes and your music synced over to your iPhone. If I remember correctly, either the iPhone or the iPod, or just the iPod, that's how you even got software updates, right? Before there was over-the-air software updates for the iPod, you plugged it into your PC and it downloaded it, right? It was the numero uno device in your life. And then something happened. The iPhone, the iPad, etc., became so capable and so portable and so convenient that the primary computing device in someone's life switched from the PC to the phone. And again, it sounds so obvious in hindsight, and everyone knows that today because we're in that world. But if you had gone back then, you would have found so much pushback to the idea of that ever happening. And I think we're starting to see the foundations of just the foundations, in my opinion. We disagree on how close we are. I think we're only starting to see the foundations of what might the post-phone world look like. And it doesn't mean you don't have a phone. It doesn't mean you don't use it. It just means it's no longer your primary computing device.
All right. So follow me on that, David, that the constraints. So if you get it to a minimum viable headset, right? Like it's a headset that has all the features that a headset should have in the future, getting better in order for the category to stand on its own. Did Apple Vision Pro fulfill that? And what are the next steps beyond that? Where I'm going, you imagine that as a minimum viable headset, and it's shipped, and it's got a tether going to a side, and they've decided that that's just, you're going to have to deal with that battery pack because we need that much power to make this experience possible near term. All right. What are the next most important things for Apple to knock off the list in order to increase time inside VR and money spent on the category? There's decreasing weight on your head, and then there's increasing the getting enough heat off of the device, right? While also doing that, it's the two sides of the argument there. You go back to that thing, why wouldn't I use my phone, or what I'm thinking about these meta bands, and what I want a terabyte of storage with me at all times. And I don't want it to need an internet connection to pick what I want from that terabyte of storage to share with the people around me. And I don't need that storage necessarily taking up space and heat and all these things on my headset if it's on my watch. That's so like if my watch has got the cellular, which burns heat and data, I have fewer weight concerns about my wrist than I have on my head. On my head, I need to shave off every last ounce, and that might include storage in some instances. Like, I don't want that weight on my head.
So, there's a few problems with this and why I would push back. So, the storage itself isn't going to add weight, but if you're constantly doing a wireless connection between the glasses and the wristband, sending all those files, you're already doing a wireless sending, right? You're sending it. The camera on the glasses captures the image, then it gets stored temporarily and sent over to the wristband in your conception. That's still a wireless transfer. For
But then
me,
it's there for a period and it's cached
sure.
locally, and you're not doing the wireless anymore. It's a
For
different
me, I'm just
caching
saying
system.
I wanted, I mean, I think we're different on this, where I want a really robust 5G LTE connection on not the glasses. I agree that that's not a good idea for thermals or for battery life, but I want it in the case. That's my point of disagreement. You want this,
Okay, yeah, that's
you
fair.
want more
Yeah.
compute in the wristband. I want more in the case. I want the case to be the place where these things are stored. For example, if you want to offload more storage, if you want to do the LTE connection, I want the case to have a speaker, so
Yeah.
that if we're talking about the practicalities of how do you replace a phone, there are going to be times where you don't want to wear glasses, right? You might be something, I'm going to talk about some daily life things, right? You might be putting some cosmetic cream on your face, or you might be washing your face in the bathroom. You might be going for a shower. But if you currently have a phone, you might still be having your phone there playing music, or you might be on a phone call with someone. For me, the case needs to become a screenless phone as well, where your glasses go in and they're still doing, because they're in the case, they're doing the compute, but there are speakers and microphones in the case itself that can let that be used as like a portable speaker. So it becomes the equivalent of a portable Alexa when you're not using it, and you can use it. You can still talk to Meta AI or Siri or whoever makes this device and say, do this, do that. But then when you put it back on your glasses, it's completely seamless. It's the same device doing the processing, and it continues to go. To me, I think not necessarily that the case needs to literally be the computer, but it does need to be the antenna and the battery
Yeah.
for a lot of this, and speakers and mics. So I think there's
I
so much.
think you've nailed it. You probably have nailed it there. And give me the option to go wired or wireless between the case and the glasses through that other route
I
I
agree with
talked
that.
about, the USB-C port at the back of one of the stocks. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You're right. And that makes a lot of sense to put the storage in this thing that goes with you as AirTag. Yeah, you've won me
And
over there. Yeah, it's a
and
better
yeah,
model.
eventually when we want to go to AR glasses, it's the puck, right? It's the case is the compute puck. I think I'm not the only person to suggest this idea,
Yeah.
but I have been saying it for a long time. When you have a HUD, you can do the computing on board. It's a little bit sluggish, but it's fine because it's an inherently two-dimensional interface. We have enough computing power in 2025 to do a HUD. If Meta were to release a newer chip with Qualcomm for this, we could get rid of the sluggishness. But when you want to start to do real-time 3D objects and proper AR, then you get to the Orion situation, right, where you have to have this compute puck. And so it seems pretty obvious to me that the compute puck and the battery case become the same thing, right? You dock the glasses in. You can hopefully still get a collapsible design. I still want the North Star to be it has to fit in your pocket. Even if it just fits in your pocket, I still think it has to fit in your pocket. But some people that are very skeptical of the idea of like, how do glasses replace a phone? It's not. It's the trifecta. It's your glasses, their case, and all of the things it will do in the future, and the wristband that we think could one day. Ian and I disagree on how long it'll take. I think I have a longer timeline than you, but I think one day would allow you to practically live a, a digital life, live in the modern world and interact with digital apps and services without having a smartphone.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to. I want that. I don't know how long it's going to be, and we're all moving to it. I love Arlen's comment. What do we mean by phones at this point? Exactly. I love it. The terms are going to change. The connections. Go watch. Was it? They call them hand terminals, I think, in The Expanse. Basically what phones are. Go watch Star Trek. They have the tricorders are worn on slings off to their side. Side shoulder bags. They pull out their tricorders or their scanning devices. The iPhone just basically got this as a feature built into it with the latest generation, where like we're already moving to you wear your phone in some instances because it's more convenient. You're doing all these other things with your device. And yeah, it's very close to a tricorder now in order to, pull it up and scan things without having any of these other devices necessary.
Yeah, and look, once you get to full AR, not what we're talking about with these display HUD glasses, but full AR, you can just have an iPhone as an app, right? take this case and bring it up, and then use the combination of hand tracking optically and EMG to just put a virtual display on the case and touchscreen it. You can use that case, or any flat object or any surface can become an iPhone, as you say, or in Apple's case, I would suspect would just run virtualized iPhone apps.
The future is so much stranger than you could possibly imagined it, right? People just interacting with black surfaces all around them.
Exactly. Once you have the ability to
Yeah.
put virtual objects and interfaces positioned in the real world, which again is not the devices we're talking about today, it's further off, it's true AR glasses. This is why it matters to have a distinction between HUD and true AR. Once you get to that, it just becomes another, virtual screen. And once you have EMG on the wrist anyway, so you can do incredibly precise hand tracking, finger tracking, and how it interacts with surfaces, right? One of the things we didn't say about the display glasses is that in December, Meta plans to release a firmware update to let you enter text by swiping your finger on a physical surface to swipe out the letters one by one. And so you can even do that in your leg. The Verge tried it. They said it worked shockingly well. That's their quote. We will have our own assessment in December. But that idea of using EMG to figure out what is your finger swiping on a physical surface, that's not limited to text entry. You can have whatever size of surface you want. On the Apple AR glasses that I suspect will not arrive until 2030 or beyond, but we'll see, you'll be able to just, if you want to have an iPad, just project a virtual iPad in front of you and tap it out. These physical devices, like, it's so crazy to think about the idea of a post-phone era now. But once you get to true AR, I think some of these physical devices will seem quaint, just as today.
More than quaint.
Idea,
it's going to be like it's the kid. It's that little Hobbit boy in Back to the Future Part 2 saying we use hands. You use hands. It's Elijah Wood appeared in Back to the Future 2 doing that joke about having to use your hands to interact with arcade games. It's we have just spent the last 15 years where outside of a car, and in many cases instead of a car, the most luxurious thing you could buy yourself is a kitted out iPhone with the maximum storage available and the right version. And we as a society have like, you're an iPhone person or an Android person. You're a green bubble or you're a blue bubble. We have like arguments where like Google is taking out massive ad campaigns in states and trying to change laws in order for RCS to become a standard so that the blue bubble, green bubble debate doesn't go away. All of this, like 15 years of discussion, 20 years of discussion has been about where you are in society based on which physical device you own. And now the next generation is getting to have virtual versions of those, and they can pull up, oh, that's what the iPhone original looked like. How odd and silly. Oh, and like it's like a toy. It's suddenly making these things that had all this value to us literally jokes.
Sure. And there's a direct analogy you can make to today and even the kids of today. For most kids today, a clock is an app on your phone. A calculator is an app on your phone. A flashlight is a feature of your phone.
Receipts is my favorite. Receipts don't refer to paper.
Exactly. Yeah. All of these things become digitized. A camera as well. Like the camera, if you say the word camera to someone who is Gen Z today and has grown up, they don't think about a physical device. They think about the app on their phone. There's so many examples. A sat nav used to be a physical thing you put in your car, right? You attached it to your windscreen and it was this dedicated device. Now again, it's an app on your phone, in the same sense that apps on phones have replaced a bunch of physical former devices. An MP3 player, right? It used to be a dedicated device we brought about to play music. Quaint already, the idea that why wouldn't I just have that on my phone? All we're trying to communicate here is that when we do get true AR glasses, you start to see that even the devices of today, the smartphones, the tablets, they start to become just software, just things that can be emulated. And every generation has their skepticism. They always think, no. I mean, of course it happened just 10 years ago, or, now I guess 20 years ago for the previous generation stuff, but mine, no, it'll be eternal. We'll all just be using phones in the 2050s. And of course it's not. Like, you have to note that everyone thought that the way they did things was normal, and everyone's reaction to the new thing was, why would I need that? I've got the old thing. Why would I want an iPhone? I've got a laptop in my backpack. Why would I want smart glasses? I've got a phone in my pocket. Convenience and expanded capabilities.
I want to go back just a step before we start getting to the end of this episode and just talk a little bit about the multi-generation planning that's required here. Because we as watchers, and I want to go back to Bloomberg's use of the words. What were the two words that they used?
Shelved in the headline
pause.
and paused in the article itself.
Both of those are pretty crummy verbs to use to describe taking people who just successfully launched one of the most innovative products that Apple has shipped in decades and pulling them to another project that they've deemed is a higher priority on a slightly different time scale than they had originally planned it. And, you've got pauses and shelves in your headlines, but no, that's like a minor course correction in the grand scheme of things. It's not, I killed a whole product line because the competitor was right first, right?
Yeah.
You're misrepresenting what is actually happening there. And then the multi-generation thing, I need to talk about that, right? You go back years where Zuckerberg is talking about the headsets near the end of the decade being really interesting. He said that years ago, that these aren't that super cool right now. They get really interesting years from now. If what I just said goes in both directions, Apple Vision Pro might have pulled the most interesting headsets in Meta's timeline a few years closer for Meta to achieve, because Apple co-opted some of the costs in building up this market for them.
Yeah.
So there's a push of both of these companies pulling things into the future just slightly sooner, because they don't just design these with the first generation in mind. They design them with second and third generations in mind, because all the things that they learn from the first ones play out in the second ones, and you see them. So, yeah, sorry, what do you want to say to that, David?
No, I was agreeing to you. I think what you're saying is absolutely right there. Apple Vision Pro in many ways is something that was pulled out of the future, and Tim Cook even used that phrase when it was launching. And people do obsess a little bit too much over, does something happen in 12 months or 24 months or 48? Like, as we always say on this show, on the grand scheme of things, if you're talking about strategy, you need to stop thinking about who did it better this month or this year. You need to think on the scale of decades, that this is an entirely new paradigm for computing, that these are still the foundations being laid. It will not matter in 20 years whether Apple Vision Air shipped in 2027 or 2028. It just simply won't. These kind of things are very kind of over-indexed on. But that said, it will be interesting if Meta can come out next year with an ultralight headset with a tethered compute puck, and then have no serious competition from Apple from that kind of price point and form factor for 2 years or so. That would be interesting to see, for sure.
There's a comment from Davin that just made me blew my mind a little bit. I love it. Wherever you are in the world right now, imagine you're holding a phone in your hand right now. Imagine you're holding a phone. Did you make a gripping gesture with your hand, or did you lay your hand flat? Davin is in our comments saying, young kids today pretend to talk on a phone with a flat hand against their head, not the gripping gesture some of you might have just remembered from holding those old phones from back in the day. And it's a really interesting thing to think about, the generational shifts that are just ingrained at us at levels that we can't even fathom.
The other one I've seen and heard is they ask young children to draw a clock, and they don't draw a circle with arrows. They draw, 111, or they don't get the numbers right, but they get the general pattern of a digital clock right.
Yeah, it's funny. It was funny to go back through my old papers. I gathered together all my old papers and stuff from when I was a kid, and there was this scribbled block writing in like third grade or something. And then by sixth grade, I had this loopy cursive handwriting. and it's almost unreadable, the cursive handwriting exposed to the block writing, and you can see the public education school system operating on my brain between those few years to transfer, to make this a mode of input. And like, here we are 20 years later. Were the parents who said you needed to, know cursive writing right? I don't think they were, right? I mean, I would like to read the Declaration of Independence myself without an AI translator having to change all that writing into something that's decipherable by me. But like, this is, we're in that moment here where all of our paradigms are changing.
For sure. Yeah, I think this has been a really interesting
This has been a fun discussion, David.
Yeah, I think we had a great discussion today.
Thank you to all of our commenters. We will, so as mentioned, just to recap, I guess you can email us if you have any questions as well to tips@uploadvr.com. Use our contact us page. We will see those questions. We won't have time to respond, but you can feed us those questions that you're wondering about. Do let us know of any tips or interesting things you see out there. We depend on our audience and our contact network to give us all the scoops that the powers that be might not be willing to give us early enough. I'm just so appreciative for your hard work, David, the work of Henry Stockdale, my colleague Don Hopper out there. We are a small team, and I am so appreciative to our members and patrons who support our work. We are a small team of journalists learning, in some cases, how to deal with paradigms that we didn't even know were there. We're discovering words that have no meaning anymore, right? And we're taking them out of our lexicon and bringing you the news that is accurate. It's a hard job. We thank you for tuning in. And when I can come in here on a Thursday and just have an amazing conversation with these audience about not just the stuff we see elsewhere on the internet, right? If you guys get annoyed by the bad headlines out there, we do too, right? There are immense bad headlines with misinformation, misrepresenting the future. We don't know what the future is going to look like, but we have about a decade of experience here that point us in the direction of where we think it's probably going to go. So we're not saying we know the future. We're just saying we guess that this is where it's going. And when we're wrong, we'll admit it. And I don't think that there's a lot of places on the internet that are like that. So thank you for this conversation. Thank you for being on this journey. This was a breakthrough episode, I think, for us, because what we talked about here is going to shape the next few years of our conversation. So thank you all.
Thanks so much, everyone. Well, we'll see you next week. And thanks again for the discussion. It's been really high quality today. As always, if you have thoughts after the show, or you're listening after the show, or you're listening to this on the audio podcast version, put a comment in YouTube, or preferably on the comments on the article linked on our website. We'll see it much faster if you comment on our website, and we'll try to answer any questions. And we love to read your thoughts and find out what you think about these things as well. And if there's anything you want assessed in my Meta Ray-Ban display review, let us know as soon as possible. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in the future.
We'll see you.